It was the cold winter of 1996, and the war was tearing New York apart. The city was gripped by fear, and the streets had turned into a bloody battlefield. Underground agents were hiding in the shadows, blending into the frantic crowds. They were risking their lives waiting to intercept a deadly enemy conspiracy. But the local gang realized their most important contact had completely vanished. She had been totally off the grid, missing for 3 whole days inside the bustling Penn Station. Steam hissed as the crowd rushed by. A wealthy young man named Julian moved through the station in a sharp suit. He pulled his wool hat down low to hide his eyes from the guards. He timed his steps perfectly as he brushed past a woman in a pink dress. In a split second, he hiddenly slipped a secret note into her gloved hand. The woman quickly took the note and headed straight to the ballroom dressing room. She stared at the wrinkled paper, trying to piece the puzzle together. She kept thinking about the mysterious package her sister sent before dying. Suddenly, the heavy door swung open, and 2 showgirls walked in laughing. They flipped a switch, and their flashlight beamed right on her pale face. The 2 girls froze, lost their minds, and screamed in pure terror. "It's a ghost," one shrieked, backing away. "The dead girl is back." The story flashes back to a quiet hallway over at Columbia University. Vivian had unexpectedly received an anonymous heavy package from her older sister. Inside the elegant velvet box sat a blood-sand-stained cracked amulet. Beneath it was a stunning sparkling dress that shined under the lights. She knew right then and there that her sister was in deep, deep trouble. 3 nights ago, in the pitch black, her sister Vanessa had left a final note. Vanessa was trapped, backed into a corner in a dark, narrow alleyway. She fought fiercely, using every bit of strength against a crowd of armed assassins. But a sharp, deafening gunshot rang out through the freezing night air. Glasses shattered on the pavement, and Vanessa collapsed onto the cold ground. To find the monster who killed her sister, Vivian dried her bitter tears. She locked her grief away and decided to take over Vanessa's identity. She put on a stunning sequined black dress that hugged her frame. She stepped onto the stage, debuting as the ballroom's new star performer. Julian sat quietly in the dim crowd, watching her every move ice Jan coldly. Later, inside the quiet dressing room, Julian suddenly lunged out of the dark. He grabbed Vivian by the throat, pinning her violently against the concrete wall. "Who the hell are you?" he hissed angrily, his eyes burning with suspicion. "Why are you wearing her clothes? Why are you pretending to be her?" Vivian gasped for air, her vision blurring under his suffocating grip. "I'm her twin sister. I'm Vivian," she finally choked out with all her might. "Vanessa is dead, and I'm here to find her killer and get revenge." Hearing the news of Vanessa's death, Julian froze in absolute shock. The anger vanished from his face, leaving his eyes full of complex emotions. He slowly let go of her neck, stepping back as his mind raced. To test if she was telling the truth, he gave her a secret meeting place. "Tomorrow night at midnight, meet me down at Pier Sisharar," he said quietly. "I'll show you some real fireworks. Just make sure you don't be late." Before stepping out into the alley, he dropped a very specific code phrase. "And remember, make sure to wear that green embroidered dress." Vivian watched his shadow disappear, her mind racing with sudden anxiety. She had gone through every single piece of her sister's old wardrobe. There was no green embroidered dress anywhere in Vanessa's room. Did a rival agent break in and steal it before she got there? Or did that specific dress even exist in the first place? What kind of terrifying, deadly trap was her sister actually caught in? The next night, a massive rainstorm poured down heavily on Pier Sisharar. The wind howled off the Atlantic, and the air was heavy with danger. The local mob was out in full force, patrolling the wet alleys with loaded guns. The guards swore that no one would slip past their perimeter tonight. Vivian had managed to find a simple green floral dress to wear for the meeting. She was currently dragging Julian through the dark, soaking wet alley. Julian was badly wounded from an ambush, bleeding heavily through his clothes. His skin was deathly pale, he was losing consciousness, and time was running out. Julian groaned in agony, leaning his entire weight against Vivian's shoulder. Just then, a crooked cop turned the corner, waving a bright flashlight. Vivian's heart stopped in her chest, but she forced herself to react instantly. She wrapped her arms around the bleeding Julian and smiled as sweetly as she could. "Officer, thank goodness, we are just trying to get home," she lied smoothly. "My boyfriend just had a few too many drinks Marcus at the pub tonight. The cop didn't buy the story at all and shined the beam directly into his face. Julian slowly lifted his heavy head, his eyes turning hard as ice. A terrifying aura of absolute authority and power flashed from his gaze. "Are you seriously telling me you don't know who I am, officer?" The cop froze instantly as the light illuminated Julian's unmistakable face. His smug, tough guy attitude turned into pure shaking terror in a second. Julian barked a cold, sharp order for the man to shut up and get lost. The cop stumbled backward into the mud and ran for his absolute life. But their brief moment of safety didn't mean the danger was over. The fleeing cop ran straight into a ruthless mob lieutenant named Marcus. The cop nervously stammered out exactly what he had seen down the lane. "The general's youngest son is down there, and he is hiding with a woman." Hearing this critical update, Marcus's eyes turned dark and completely murderous. Through the driving rain, Marcus waved his arm and led his crew forward. Their heavy metal flashlights cut sharply through the stormy night air. The blinding beams landed right on the huddling figures of Julian and Vivian. Marcus stepped closer, catching a clear, full glimpse of the woman's face. The mob boss lost all of his smug confidence in a fraction of a second. He stared at Vivian in absolute horrified and breathless disbelief. He knew for a cold fact that this exact woman was killed 3 days ago. How on earth could a rotting corpse be walking the city streets again? The whole massive mess had started days before with a sudden violent arrest. Professor Miller was dragged from his classroom for writing anti-Zan war articles. Julian and his underground crew were panicking, trying to find a way out. Julian planned to pull some strings and use his high Zan level family influence. But Vivian had quietly followed him, overhearing the entire conversation from the door. Later that evening, Vivian and Julian got into a heated, explosive argument. Vivian pointed out that a woman close to Julian was tied to her sister's murder. Julian sighed, revealing that the woman belonged to the military high command. Faced with this extreme web of danger, Vivian made a bold final choice. She stepped forward, offering to finish the dangerous mission her sister started. Julian looked at her, admiring her raw guts and her unbreakable spirit. "I'll give you exactly 3 days to make up your mind for good," he said. "Either you join our underground crew completely, or you go back to your normal life." Meanwhile, Julian was facing immense pressure from his own flesh and blood. His powerful father demanded he marry a wealthy, high-Zan society girl named Cynthia. The old general brought up Julian's past rebellious mistakes as a direct threat. But despite the heavy psychological pressure, Julian flatly refused to bend. He knew this family drama was just the calm before a massive storm. One partner was trapped in a toxic web of high-Zan level family politics. The other was completely consumed by dark thoughts of bloody revenge. Could their fragile, desperate alliance actually keep Professor Miller alive? The clock was ticking down fast on the 3 days Julian had given her. A clever high-Zan stake spy trap was officially put into motion. Julian disguised himself as a low-Zan level, greasy yellow cab driver. He drove Vivian over to a corrupt city politician's brownstone house. Vivian adjusted her coat and walked through the front door with absolute confidence. She looked the politician's secret mistress in the eye and exposed her past. She lied smoothly, claiming the politician's powerful wife was coming for the kid. The panicked mistress lost all control, sobbing and packing her bags in fear. Vivian used a sweet piece of candy to lead the little boy quietly outside. She quickly handed him over to Julian and the waiting Professor Miller. This clever trick was designed to cause absolute chaos inside the enemy's home. Next, Vivian changed into a gorgeous eye-Zan-catching yellow evening dress. She acted charming and tipsy to get close to the politician at a high-Zan end bar. The target was sitting at the counter, completely losing his mind with worry. He truly believed his furious wife had kidnapped his secret, illegitimate child. Vivian saw her perfect opening and whispered a fake solution into his ear. "Just tell the press the little kid actually belongs to my cousin," she said. "He is locked up downtown right now, but a man with your power can bail him out." The desperate politician eagerly fell hook, line, and sinker for her trap. He had absolutely no clue the man he was bailing out was a resistance leader. The rescue operation was completely flawless, but Vivian ended up totally wasted. Late that night, Julian carried her heavy sleeping body back upstairs in his arms. Vivian mumbled incoherently through her tears, caught in a drunken haze. "You can't marry Cynthia. Please, I'm so sorry, Vanessa," she wept. Julian knew his father was forcing this marriage to secure a political alliance. But looking down at Vivian, Julian was ready to fight his family to the absolute death. His heart already belonged completely to the brave, broken woman in his arms. A few days later, the core team gathered secretly inside a hidden back office. Professor Miller shook Vivian's hand, thanking her deeply for saving his life. Julian smiled and officially brought her into their secret underground circle. They were an elite unit, working under the radar to protect the city. Vivian stood tall, officially taking over her late sister's dangerous mantle. She looked at the team and swore she would never let them down. But living a double life meant facing ruthless tests around every single corner. One rainy night, a rough, aggressive agent named Standard Zanjo cut them off in the street. He mocked Vivian openly, comparing her looks to her dead, tragic sister. Julian didn't hesitate for a second. He stepped in to protect his woman. He grabbed Do tightly by the leather collar and forced him to back off. After dodging bullets and dodging death together, the two grew incredibly close. Under the dim glow of a street lamp, Julian crossed paths with a poor flower girl. He pulled out a stack of bills and bought every single basket on her cart. "If you ever run into trouble, head to the old bookstore on West Street," he whispered. Even this innocent Zan-looking little girl was a vital scout in their massive web. Then, Julian turned around and handed Vivian a single perfect red rose. By the warm, flickering light of a match, he shared his ultimate, beautiful dream. "I want freedom, truth, and real justice to light up this broken world." In these dark wards and torn times, they were true partners in love and revolution. Backstage at the Grand Ballroom, a dangerous tension was slowly brewing. Vivian had just walked off the stage after finishing a massive singing performance. A jealous, bitter rival blocked her path, cornering her right at the door. The rival used her family status to bully and intimidate Vivian face Jan to Jan face. She hurled insults, demanding Vivian back off from her high Zan society connections. Vivian kept her composure, but her eyes turned incredibly sharp and steady. Just then, the greedy club manager walked into the room with a greasy smile. "A powerful elite family has booked the entire main hall tonight," he barked. "You better get back out there and give them a perfect show, Vivian." Out in the main hall, massive crystal chandeliers were glowing elegantly. Julian was currently being suffocated by his wealthy, bratty fiancée, Cynthia. Cynthia was acting incredibly spoiled, clinging to his arm and throwing tantrums. She forced him to sit at the VIP table, looking around for any potential rivals. Julian sat there, completely disgusted by the fake luxury and the phoniness. He ignored her entirely, treating her with absolute stones and cold silence. Cynthia noticed his gaze drift toward Vivian, who was singing beautifully on stage. She made a disgusting, sharp comment, calling the performer a cheap, low-Zan class toy. She aggressively dragged Julian onto the crowded dance floor to show him off. "Tell the manager to fire that annoying singer right now, Julian," she demanded. The gala reached its peak when the old general stood up to announce the wedding. He used his booming voice to tie the fortunes of the two families together. This arrogant move completely set off Julian's deep, buried rage. He stood up, slamming his glass down, and rejected the marriage in front of everyone. Julian's public defiance earned him a cold, terrifying threat from his father later. The old man swore he would lock him away forever under strict family rules. He even threatened to target and eliminate Julian's closest underground friends. Vivian watched the intense family blowout happen from the dark shadows. She felt a wave of anxiety, especially since her handler, Clara, was still missing. She had to figure out how to navigate this dangerous elite family war. Behind all the music and glamour, a real storm was hitting the city. Vivian slipped into the basement and discovered that Clara had been locked away in a cage. In this deeply corrupt town, the web of power was closing in on them fast. The general's cruel words proved exactly how toxic high society really was. Vivian knew she had to risk everything to break Clara out of that dungeon. In that dark, crumbling wards and torn era, every single soul was trapped. Julian looked across the dim room at the angry young woman standing before him. A hidden, deeply buried look of intense agony flashed across his blue eyes. He knew for a fact that 100 enemy eyes were watching them right now. To keep her alive, he had to put on a cruel, heartless, and arrogant mask. He stepped forward and grabbed Vivian roughly by the shoulders, his voice dead cold. "Don't take this whole thing so seriously, kid," he sneered unfeelingly. "Tell your pathetic little resistance crew to pack up and get out of my city, because I really don't want to have to hunt you down and destroy you later." His cruel words cut straight through Vivian's soul like a sharpened steel blade. She snapped her head up, pointing a fiercely shaking, trembling finger at his face. "I completely, utterly misjudged the kind of man you are, Julian," she screamed. "My poor sister died protecting a Tudzan-faced, heartless traitor like you. She threw her beautiful life away into the dirt for absolutely nothing." Horrific images of Vanessa, lying in a pool of fresh blood, flashed in her mind. She remembered her sister being tortured, dying alone in heavy, rusted iron chains, but Julian didn't let a single ounce of emotion break through his icy mask. He turned his back on her coldly, walking away to sit on the edge of the bed. He let out a sharp, mocking, and cruel laugh that sent a shiver down the room. "Your sister was just a cheap, replaceable lounge singer at a club," he said. "She's dead, she's gone, and nobody gives a damn. Now get out of my sight." Vivian stared at his stone and cold face, tears of pure hatred welling in her eyes. A deep, unbreakable desire for vengeance took permanent root in her broken soul. The dark drama kept escalating fiercely the very next morning. Inside the grand, foggy courtyard of the estate, two workers carried a stretcher. A heavy body was completely covered under a stained, cheap white sheet. Thick, dark red blood was slowly soaking through the rough cotton fabric. The corrupt club owner, Mr. Miller, took a heavy puff of his expensive cigar. "What awful, rotten luck to find a fresh corpse right at my front door," he spat. Vivian stood a few feet away, trembling slightly in her green embroidered dress. She watched them lift the sheet and realized the dead woman was Clara, her protector. The sudden, violent shock and immense guilt completely shattered her fragile heart. Just a few short nights ago, Clara had held her hand tight in the empty hall. Clara had begged her with crying eyes not to take the risk and go to the pier. "If anything ever happens to you, Vivian, your sister's soul will never rest." Now, her sweet, brave protector was just another cold, broken body in the dirt. She was being thrown into the back of a truck like a piece of worthless garbage. The greedy owner noticed Vivian crying in the corner and barked at her loudly. "Dry your damn tears, kid. You're still scheduled on the main stage tonight." Vivian clenched her floral dress, crying silently as the truck drove away into the fog. "I am so incredibly sorry, Clara. This nightmare is all my fault." Night fell quickly over Manhattan, and the ballroom lights turned back on. Julian arrived at the gala wearing a sharp, formal military uniform covered in medals. He held hands tightly with Cynthia, who was showing off a white designer dress. Cynthia smiled brightly for the flashing cameras, leaning heavily against his shoulder. "You look absolutely incredible in your uniform tonight, babe," she cheered loudly. Julian's true Hydezan level status was out in the open for the city to see. He was the dangerous, untouchable second son of the command's most powerful general. Their shallow conversation was cut short as Vivian slowly walked over to the table. She wore her sister's green dress, her face completely expressionless as she poured wine. Cynthia's fake smile vanished instantly, replaced by pure aristocratic arrogance. Julian just leaned back on the leather sofa, treating Vivian like a total stranger. Vivian finished filling the glasses and raised her own crystal cup with a steady hand. "To a truly unforgettable night, Julian, Cynthia," she said with a polite bow. As she turned around to walk back to the stage, Cynthia stopped her with a laugh. Cynthia began to viciously humiliate and mock her in front of the surrounding crowd. "Julian ordered this incredibly rare, expensive wine just for you, sweetie. Leaving the table after just one tiny sip is incredibly disrespectful, don't you think?" Vivian took a deep breath, freezing in her tracks as the crowd turned to watch. But before Vivian could even open her mouth to reply, Julian cut in coldly. He backed up his wealthy fiancée, throwing a devastating, harsh insult at Vivian. "Don't waste the premium liquor on a Lodesand class common girl, Cynthia," he sneered. "Giving fine wine to a girl like her is a total absolute waste of money." Cynthia absolutely loved the cruel comment, smirking proudly as she turned back around. But Julian's gloved hand tightened so hard around his glass that the crystal nearly cracked. He was forcing himself to act like a heartless villain just to keep her out of the fire. He knew that knowing the truth would bring her nothing but a swift, violent death. The real dangerous confrontation finally happened deep inside a locked underground bunker. Julian sat alone at a dark mahogany desk, looking incredibly exhausted and stressed. The heavy steel door clicked open, and his older brother, Thomas, slowly walked inside. Thomas wore a tailored high-zan and 3-zan piece suit and sharp, gold-zan-rimmed glasses. The two powerful brothers stared at each other in a long, suffocating, dead silence. The psychological tension inside the concrete room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Thomas walked over slowly and slammed both hands violently down on the wooden desk. His dark eyes behind the clean lenses looked completely, dangerously unhinged. He got straight to the point, his voice dropping to a low, chilling whisper. "Are you backing Dad's secret plan to surrender the city of New York to the enemy?" Thomas smiled a cruel, twisted smile, giving his younger brother a final ultimatum. "I don't give a single damn about your personal morals or your bleeding heart, kid. If you dare betray this family, I will personally take you out back and bury you." The horrific death threat exposed the terrifying reality of the general's inner circle. The high-zan level leaders of the family had completely sold out their own country. Julian was completely backed into a tight corner, with zero safe options left on the table. He forced his blinding rage down, put on a calm face, and lied to his brother. "Don't worry about me, Thomas. We are blood, and I am standing right with you." Thomas patted him firmly on the shoulder, telling him to be fully ready by tomorrow morning. As the heavy door shut, the old general himself slowly walked out of the dark shadows. Julian turned his back on them, staring out the reinforced glass window at the skyline. He knew his dangerous, lonely undercover war for survival had officially just begun. He would gladly die in the trenches before letting these traitors destroy his home city. The world was tearing itself apart. In the dark heart of the city, the war spared no one. Yet amid the ashes and blood, there were stories born of defiance. Some love stories are so fierce, they outlived death itself. Aiden walked with a heavy, slow tread. He was a decorated military officer. His uniform bore the dust of battle. His right hand was heavily bandaged, stained with fresh, seeping crimson. He stepped inside the quiet office of a bustling New York hospital. The room smelled of antiseptic and old wooden floorboards. His eyes scanned the cluttered room, finally landing on a mahogany desk. There sat a thick, tied stack of handwritten white letters. On the very top envelope, the ink was faded but clear, "To my beloved Alice." Aiden's breath hitched in his throat. He reached out a trembling hand, his fingers hovering over the paper. Suddenly, heavy footsteps echoed just outside the frosted glass door. He quickly pulled his hand back, composing his stoic expression. Dr. Smith walked into the room, carrying a sterile metal tray. He stopped, surprised to see Aiden. "Officer," the doctor said kindly, "let me look at that hand." Aiden sat down in silence, staring blankly at the wall. The doctor began unraveling the gauze, revealing a deep, jagged laceration. Noticing Aiden's intense, fixed gaze, the doctor looked toward the desk. He sighed softly, a weary sound. "Ah, those letters," Dr. Smith murmured, cleansing the wound with iodine. "They belong to a young nurse who works the night shift here. Her name is Alice." Aiden didn't move a single muscle. The doctor continued his work. "She writes to her fiancé constantly. Every spare moment she gets, she fills a page with ink, but she never mails a single one. They just pile up right there." Aiden's jaw tightened instantly. His eyes grew dark and distant. "Why doesn't she mail them?" Aiden's voice was a low whisper cracking under a weight of emotion. Dr. Smith tied off the fresh bandage, shaking his head with deep sorrow. We all know the truth here. Her fiancé went missing overseas more than a year ago. He is probably buried in Europe or lost at the bottom of the sea. But no one here has the heart to shatter her fragile hope. We let her keep her illusion. Aiden felt a sudden, sharp pang deep within his chest, like a physical blade twisting. As the doctor gathered his tools, he tried to make casual conversation. You know, it is funny, Smith said. She is originally from New York, too, born and raised right here. I believe you two are actually from the exact same neighborhood. Aiden took a slow, deep breath, fighting to keep his voice steady. He hid the immense, suffocating pain that was tearing his soul apart. Actually, Aiden replied quietly, his voice dropping an octave. I used to know her a long time ago. Dr. Smith stopped completely, shocked. He looked at Aiden with wide eyes. You knew her? The doctor asked. Do you know anything about her family? I've worked with her for months, and she never speaks of home. She is a ghost among us. But Aiden chose to protect her, choosing to bury the agonizing truth. He was that missing fiancé. He was the ghost she loved. I don't know much, Aiden lied, staring down at his bandaged hand. Just that her fiancé vanished into the fog. Just that he is never coming back. Before standing up to leave the room, Aiden stopped and looked back. His eyes locked onto Dr. Smith's. Are you a married man, doctor? The doctor blinked, caught off guard. No, I am not, Smith replied. Aiden leaned in just a fraction, his gaze becoming intensely piercing. Do you care for her? Do you love Alice? The room fell into absolute silence. Aiden searched the doctor's face, looking for a safe harbor for her, a man to take his place before the darkness swallowed him whole. 6 long, grueling months passed by. The winter gave way to spring, but the war only grew hungrier. Alice sat alone at the desk, the hospital quiet around her. Under the flicker of a dim lamp, she moved her pen across paper, writing words of undying devotion to a man she couldn't find. The ink captured her tears. Another nurse walked into the room, carrying a stack of patient files. She looked at Alice and teased her softly. Still writing to the shadow, Alice? You are the strangest girl I know. 100 letters written, and not a single stamp purchased. Alice stopped her pen, freezing. She forced a bitter, hollow smile and began folding the paper. I just do it to pass time, she said, her voice completely flat. It keeps my mind off the blood. Suddenly, the loud shift whistle blew, piercing the heavy nighttime air. Alice carefully placed the new letter inside a small wooden lockbox, turning the key with practiced care. As she stood up to stretch her aching back, terrifying screams echoed from the courtyard. The heavy front doors burst open. We need all hands on deck. A orderly yelled down the hall. A massive convoy was ambushed. Casualties are coming in by the dozens. The peaceful night was instantly shattered. They needed every piece of emergency help. Alice didn't hesitate for a second. She grabbed a mobile medical cart, loading it with bandages and morphine, and rushed out into the brightly lit hallway. She sprinted down the linoleum corridor, the wheels of her cart squeaking loudly. But as she rounded the sharp corner leading to the main triage bay, she froze dead in her tracks. Her breath left her body completely. At the far end of the long hall stood a man, tall and resolute. He was dressed in a pristine military uniform, metals catching the harsh electric light. He was watching her in absolute silence. It was Aiden. 6 months of agonizing longing, a year of believing he was dead, flooded her heart in a single second. Her knees grew weak beneath her. The world seemed to slow down, the screaming of the wounded fading out. Aiden looked at her with eyes full of sorrow, his lips parted, but no words came. But the cruel reality of wartime gave them no luxury of a reunion. A wave of frantic medics pushed right past, shoving a bloody stretcher between them. The chaotic crowd filled the hallway, breaking their short, miraculous gaze. Nurse Alice, we need you now. A doctor roared from the operating room. Alice was violently pulled back to reality by the desperate hands of her co-workers. She had a duty to save lives. She grabbed the handles of the stretcher, forcing her legs to run forward. But as she ran toward the trauma bay, she kept looking back over her shoulder, her eyes searching through the crowd desperately. Aiden didn't move from his spot. He just stood there like a statue, watching her disappear into the sea of blood. Hours later, the chaos finally subsided. The gray light of dawn entered the hospital. In the quiet, secluded courtyard garden, away from the smell of death, the two of them finally stood alone. The morning mist hung low over the grass. Aiden looked at his beautiful, pale love, his heart breaking into 1,000 pieces. He closed his eyes, unable to bear her gaze. "I am so sorry, Alice," he whispered. The words felt small, almost pathetic. Alice walked up to him, her hands trembling, her voice shaking with an ancient rage. "I am so tired of I am sorry," she wept. "I have heard it from every doctor, from every official telegram. I don't want your apologies anymore, Aiden. I want the truth. I want answers." Aiden's stoic military walls finally collapsed. He broke down right in front of her. "This war is an unpredictable monster," he shouted, his voice echoing off the brick. "I go to the front lines tomorrow. I don't even know if I will survive the day. I have seen men blown to ash beside me. How can I promise you a beautiful future? How could I selfishly tie you to a ghost? I couldn't bear to ruin your young life with a promise that might end in a coffin." Alice sobbed uncontrollably, her chest heaving. She stepped into his personal space, striking his chest with her small fist. "Why do you get to decide my fate?" she cried. "Why do you think your protection is a kindness? How could you leave me alone in the dark?" Seeing her utter profound heartbreak, Aiden lost all of his rigid control. He stepped forward with sudden force, grabbing her waist and pulling her flush against him. He buried his face in her soft hair, holding her as if she might vanish into air. Alice held onto his uniform with a death grip, her face pressed into his collarbone. She whispered fiercely directly into his ear, her voice carrying the weight of a sacred vow. "Listen to me, Aiden. If you die for this country across the sea, I will die right along with you. You gave me your heart years ago. You took my entire world with you. My life is all I have left to give. If you don't come back, I won't stay." Aiden closed his eyes tightly, hot, heavy tears streaming down his face. He realized he could no longer run from her love. He couldn't fight her devotion. "Okay," he whispered into the morning fog. "Okay, we are in this together." But the cruel wheels of fate never pause for the vows of lovers. Only 3 days later, Alice was walking outside the white doors of the emergency room. She was carrying a tray of fresh glass vials. Suddenly, a frantic siren wailed outside. Another batch of critically wounded soldiers was rushed through the back ambulance bay. Orderlies were screaming at the top of their lungs, "Clear the hallway! Move out of the way!" Alice stepped back against the cold wall, holding the metal tray tightly to her chest. As a blood-soaked gurney rolled quickly past her, the white sheet covering the patient shifted. A pale, limp hand dropped down over the edge. Alice's eyes locked onto the wrist. There, tied around the pale skin, was a frayed red string holding a jade amulet. With a sudden, sickening sound, the old red string snapped under the wheel. The small green jade amulet hit the linoleum, shattering into a dozen tiny, sharp pieces. It was the exact protection charm she had given him before his first deployment. Alice's heart stopped beating in her chest. The metal tray slipped from her numb fingers, crashing loudly onto the floor, vials breaking. She turned around in a daze of pure terror, walking toward the stopped gurney in a state of total, deafening silence. The rest of the room became a blur. She reached out a cold, shaking hand and slowly pulled back the bloody white sheet. Aiden's face emerged from beneath the cloth. His skin was pale, covered in dried blood, his beautiful eyes closed forever in death. His lifeless face shattered her entire world. Looking down at her dead lover, the initial shock in her eyes slowly hardened into absolute cold despair. The light in her soul went dark. Suddenly, memories flashed through her mind like a chaotic, beautiful film strip. She remembered locking eyes with him on a crowded Manhattan street corner. She remembered him sitting at a quiet cafe wearing his dark sunglasses, deep in thought, looking up at her with a rare, bright smile. She remembered him holding a bouquet of red roses, pressing his warm forehead against hers, asking, "When this damn war is finally won, and the world is safe again, will you do me the honor of marrying me?" She vividly remembered her own ecstatic smile, the way she threw her arms around his neck, yelling into the night air, "Yes, 1,000 times yes." But now, all of those beautiful promises were nothing but shattered dust on a hospital floor. Yet, there was a secret hidden in the days before. A piece of the puzzle Alice never knew. Just 2 evenings before Aiden's final battle, Dr. Smith had walked into her small office. He was holding a single perfect red rose and 2 tickets to a Broadway premiere. He had finally gathered the courage to confess his love, but Alice had immediately sensed something wrong. She looked at the doctor's nervous eyes, then looked at the fresh bandages on the desk. "Who was the soldier you just treated?" she had demanded, her instincts flaring. The doctor had frozen, remembering Aiden's harsh words, "If you care for her, never tell her I was here." So Dr. Smith had looked away and lied to her face. But Alice was far too intelligent to be fooled. She noticed the specific military grease on the floor, the scent of his familiar tobacco in the air. Using the tiny clues left behind in the room, she pressed the doctor hard against the wall. "It was Aiden, wasn't it? He was in this room. Tell me the truth, Smith. Where is he?" Cornered by her fierce, unyielding gaze, the young doctor cracked, letting out a heavy sigh. "Aiden made me promise not to say a word," he admitted. "He told me he is going to a suicide mission. He wants you to forget him, Alice. He wants you to move on." The doctor then looked at her with desperate hope, asking if she could ever consider a life with him instead. Alice didn't even hesitate for a single second. "He is my fiancé, and he is my only home," she cried. Learning that Aiden had just left the building, she ran out into the pouring rain to find him. That desperate chase was what led to their final embrace in the garden. They used to have so much joy before the draft. They used to walk hand in hand on secluded paths covered in golden autumn leaves, listening to the distant sounds of Central Park. Alice had confessed to him during one of those walks that she had torn up her ticket for the evacuation ship. She chose not to flee to the safety of Canada. She stayed in the line of fire to become a nurse, solely to be close to the port where his ship docked. Aiden had held her so tight her ribs ached, sharing the quiet, unspeakable horrors of the front lines. The mud, the fire, the screaming, he had wept. "But your face is the only thing that pulls me through. Your love is the only anchor keeping me alive." That was the beautiful afternoon she gave him the amulet. "Your protection is the only thing that matters to me," she had said, kissing his warm cheek. But the dark reality of war never gives a reprieve. During that very walk beneath the autumn trees, a loud military horn blew from the nearby base. A young private came running up the path, handing Aiden a set of sealed, urgent deployment orders. The regiment was moving out immediately to the harbor. There was no time for a proper goodbye, no time to pack. Letting go of her soft, warm hand felt like dying. As Aiden turned his back to walk toward the trucks, he closed his eyes and thought to himself, "I am so sorry, my sweet Alice. This is the last time I will ever leave you behind. Next time, I will make sure you are safe forever." The beautiful vision faded sharply back to reality. The warm autumn leaves turned into a cold, dark room. Inside her quiet, lonely apartment, Alice sat perfectly still on the edge of the bed. She was dressed in a beautiful black morning dress, a vintage netting hat shadowing her pale face. On the mahogany nightstand beside her lamp, a heavy silver revolver lay completely still. The air in the room was thick with a final despair. She looked around the empty apartment, and visions of Aiden began to dance in the shadows. She saw him tipping his hat to her with a smile. She saw him lifting her off her feet in his white suit, spinning her around under the warm ballroom lights. The heavy tide of memories drowned her senses. Her mind drifted back to their very first meeting years ago. Before the uniforms and the medals, it was in a dark, dusty basement downtown, during a midnight raid by a rival faction. He had mistaken her for an enemy operative, pinning her against the brick wall with a rough hand, his fingers tight around her throat, demanding answers. "Who sent you? Give me a name," he had barked. "I am Jane's twin sister, Alice." She had gasped, tears of terror spilling over his leather gloves. "Jane died in the factory fire. Let me join your fight," Aiden had roared back at her in a fit of protective anger. "You are a child. You are not your sister. You can never replace her in this dangerous game." But as the dangerous months rolled on, they both dropped their icy defensive guards. He became her fierce protector, her savior. He had carried her home through a freezing rainstorm when a stray bullet grazed her slender ankle. They had learned to laugh together in secret clubs, dancing slowly in empty ballrooms after hours, his lips gently pressing against her forehead. They had spent hours sitting by large, bright windows, planning a peaceful, beautiful life in France, the very moment the treaty was finally signed. But now, looking at the quiet apartment, she knew that beautiful future was completely gone. Her solemn vow made in the hospital garden echoed loudly in the silence of her mind. If you die for this country, I will die with you. Alice realized she had absolutely nothing left to live for. The world was just an empty, hollow shell without him. She turned her body slowly toward the nightstand and picked up the cold, heavy silver gun. Her movements were calm, almost graceful. 2 final tears slipped down her pale cheeks, disappearing into the black lace of her dress. She stared into the empty, quiet air of the room, as if she could see his beautiful ghost standing there, and spoke her final, loving confession. Aiden, my love, I have absolutely no regrets. You went first to prepare the way for me. This time, you won't be able to push me away. In the pitch-black silence of the room, Alice raised the weapon, pressed it to her heart, and firmly pulled the heavy metal trigger. A single deafening gunshot pierced the quiet night. The glass in the window rattled from the force. Then, the world fell into a deep, endless silence, and the screen faded into a total heavy darkness. The tragic story had reached its final, brutal curtain, the end. But let us look back one last time to the very beginning of the loop. In that quiet, sterile hospital office long before the deployment orders were signed, Aiden had stood over the doctor's desk. While Dr. Smith was washing his hands, Aiden had looked down at the stack of unmailed letters. He spoke in a low, fierce whisper to the doctor, revealing how deeply he truly knew her soul. She loves wild red roses, Aiden had murmured. She always struggles with formal silverware at dinner, and her beloved twin sister passed away in a fire. Listen to me carefully, Dr. Smith. Take the best care of her while I am gone. Give her the life I can never provide. If you ever break her heart, or let her suffer, I swear I will come back from the dead to find you. After the young doctor had left the room, the silent, broken soldier stood completely alone. A clock on the wall ticked heavily in the quiet. With trembling, bandaged hands, Aiden reached out and picked up the thick stack of her beautiful, unmailed letters. He held the paper tightly against his uniform, pressing them directly over his aching heart, breathing in the faint scent of her perfume. He didn't leave them behind on the desk. He carefully tucked the letters inside his coat, secured the buttons over his... Under the dim, flickering candlelight, a brutal assault was taking place. The air in the room was thick with dust, smelling like old wood and terror. Jax, the notorious town bully, had his hand clamped tight around Rose's neck, a twisted, greasy grin distorting his fat face. Rose struggled in sheer agony, her fingernails scratching desperately at his thick wrists. She was losing air fast, her lungs burning, but with her last bit of strength, she gasped out a final, desperate threat. My husband, Ethan, will make you pay for this. But hearing the name, Ethan only made Jax laugh more maniacally. He tightened his grip even more, cursing Ethan's name into the empty room and mocking him for thinking he could stand against the entire town. Rose's face turned deathly pale as she screamed desperately for help, hoping someone would hear her through the storm. Jax stared down at her fragile beauty, spewing vile, disgusting words, laughing at her helplessness. Right at that critical second, the heavy front door exploded inward with a loud bang, and Ethan charged into the room like a raging god of wrath, holding a thick wooden club. He lined up his shot with Jax's exposed back and swung the club with every ounce of strength he possessed. Get the hell off my wife! The heavy, powerful blow hit Jax square between the shoulder blades, sending him crashing hard onto the floorboards. Driven by a desperate need to protect Rose, Ethan's eyes burned with a terrifying rage. He didn't give the bastard a single second to breathe, stepping forward and raining down blow after blow, smashing the club right into Jax's head and body. Touch my wife again, and I'll kill you. Just moments ago, Jax thought he was untouchable. Now he was crying like a helpless baby, rolling in the dirt, weeping and shrieking at the top of his lungs. Ethan, please, stop. I was wrong. I'm sorry. Just let me go. I have money. I'll pay you everything I have. Seeing this brutal showdown, you must be wondering how things got this bad, how this newlywed couple managed to piss off the entire town, and how they crossed paths with a vicious bully like Jax. It all started on the day of the marriage pool during the Civil War, when years of fighting had left the western frontier short on young men. The local laws dictated that any single man turning 18 must take a state-assigned bride to work the land. That morning, Mayor Vance arrived at the main town square with a crowd of young men, including Ethan's neighbor, Lee. A few young women stood in a small yard waiting to be assigned, but one of them stood completely apart from the rest. She was wearing tattered, filthy rags, her hair looked like a literal bird's nest, and her face was entirely covered in a thick black layer of coal dust and soot. The moment Lee saw her, he recoiled, pulling Ethan aside and whispering with a face full of pure disgust, "Man, whatever you do, don't pick her. She's Rose, the town's most famous jinx. Word is, she cursed her own father to death the day she was born. Anyone who takes her will end up in a grave." Ethan looked at Lee's judgmental, sneering face, frowned slightly, and said absolutely nothing. The town rules required a lottery, and when Mayor Vance gave the order, Lee rushed forward impatiently, ripping open his slip and yelling in pure excitement, "Haha, I got number one. I get first pick." Lee immediately pointed to a clean, well-dressed girl nearby and happily led her away. Standing to the side, Jax watched the scene, the thick fat on his face shaking with laughter. As the other girls were chosen one by one, only Rose was left standing alone in the freezing dirt, covered in black dust. Seeing that absolutely nobody wanted her, Mayor Vance said coldly, "Since no one picked her by law, she goes to work as a slave in my saloon down by the docks." Hearing the word saloon, Rose's eyes immediately filled with tears, and she begged the crowd with a breaking voice, "Please, not the saloon. I beg you, don't send me there." But the surrounding townspeople offered no sympathy, only staring with cold indifference or mocking her misery. Jax laughed out loud from the crowd, shouting, "A garbage jinx belongs in a garbage place like that." Just as the guards were about to drag Rose away, Ethan, who had been watching silently, took a deep breath, stepped forward out of the noisy crowd, raised his hand, and pointed directly at the girl covered in ash. Word by word, his voice rang out loud and firm, "I choose her." That single sentence made the entire square fall dead silent, everyone staring at Ethan like he was a total lunatic. But little did they know, Ethan was a modern soul, reborn into this brutal world with advanced knowledge. On their wedding night, the couple returned to their broken cabin, but before they could even sit down, a deafening pounding shook the front door. A mob of ignorant townspeople was outside, battering the door and screaming hysterically, "Ethan, you crazy fool, marrying that jinx will bring a curse upon this whole town. Get her out." Inside, Rose shrank into a dark corner, tears rolling down her cheeks, hanging her head in deep shame and whispering, "Honey, I'm so sorry. I ruined your life." Ethan looked out at the mindless mob, and a fierce anger flared up in his chest. He slammed his hand on the table and roared furiously at the bolted door, "Get the hell off my property. Anyone else talk smack, and I'll bury you myself." The sheer power in his voice instantly crushed the noise outside. The pounding stopped, and the townspeople finally dispersed, muttering curses. Ethan turned around, walked gently to Rose's side, and lightly tapped her shoulder to comfort her. "Don't listen to those idiots. As long as I'm here, no one touches a hair on your head. You must be hungry. Let me cook something for you." But before they could catch their breath, another local tyrant, Wayne, targeted them because Ethan's late father owed Wayne a massive debt of $50. That afternoon, Wayne showed up with a gang of thugs, cornering Ethan right outside his house and threatening to break his legs. Rose turned pale with fear, tugging at Ethan's shirt and begging him to give Wayne their last $5. But that tiny amount was nowhere near enough. Wayne's predatory eyes locked onto Rose, and he made his vile intentions crystal clear. "If I don't get my money today, I'm taking your pretty little wife to clear the debt." Ethan's blood boiled with rage, and he gritted his teeth, forcing out a deal. "Give me 3 days, you'll get your money." Wayne let out a cold sneer and threw down a contract, stating that if the debt wasn't paid on time, Ethan's house and land would belong to Wayne. With no other choice, Ethan was forced to press his bloody thumbprint onto the paper. Worse, earlier that very day while Ethan was away, Wayne had broken into the cabin, lying to Rose that Ethan had run away like a coward and reaching out to grab her chin. Rose refused to believe it, grabbed a pair of sharp shears from the toolbox, pressed them against her own throat, and screamed that she would end her own life if they came closer. Wayne pretended to back off, but secretly signaled his man, who crept up from behind Rose, snatched the shears, and tied her tightly to a chair. Right after that, the lustful Jack sneaked in, leading to the brutal attack at the start of our story. Cut back to the present reality inside the cabin, where Jax was still groveling on the floorboards like a beaten dog. Ethan lowered his wooden club, staring down coldly, while Rose clutched her dress, her heart still pounding in fear. "Honey, stop. If you hit him again, you'll kill him." Ethan turned and gave his wife a reassuring nod, then snapped his gaze back to Jax, his voice like ice. "Get on your knees and beg my wife for forgiveness." To save his miserable skin, Jax threw away all his dignity, scrambling up and slamming his forehead repeatedly against the floor, crying for mercy. "Now get the hell out of here. If I see your face again, you're dead." Ethan stomped his foot hard and Jax fled out the door, rolling and scrambling into the night. Silence finally returned to the cabin. Ethan dropped the club and carefully held Rose's shoulders, his eyes filled with absolute heartbreak. "Baby, are you okay? Did that bastard hurt you anywhere?" Rose shook her head, her eyes bright with tears. "Where were you? What took you so long?" Ethan scratched his head with a bit of guilt, pulling over a large basket with a bright smile. "The mountain trail was pitch black and dangerous, but look, I used some wild herbs down by the river and caught a whole basket of fresh fish. To raise the $50 for Wayne, Ethan planned to sell the fish at the city market. But before he could even clean them, Wayne the parasite showed up with his thugs again. Seeing Ethan organizing the fish, Wayne mocked him openly, nodding to his thug who stepped up and kicked Ethan's barrels to pieces, spilling the fish into the mud. They were clearly trying to drive him to absolute despair. Unable to take it anymore, Ethan suddenly exploded, launching a brutal right hook straight into Wayne's face, sending him crashing into the dirt. Wayne shrieked hysterically, "I am the official district overseer. I will throw your broke ass into the state penitentiary." Wayne screamed at his thugs to get him, but right then, Ethan's uncle Dennis showed up swinging a heavy hoe. Dennis was a battle-tan-hardened veteran from the Union Army, and in a matter of seconds, he systematically beat the thugs until they were begging for mercy. Realizing he had messed with the wrong crowd, Wayne tried to run, but Dennis and Ethan trapped him in a corner and gave him a total beating. The bully completely broke down, crying and screaming that he didn't want the $50 debt anymore. Dennis snatched the contract, and Ethan ripped it into shreds, uttering one cold word, "Gwyn." After dealing with those lowlifes, they finally enjoyed a few peaceful days. Rose washed the dirt off her face and changed into clean, proper clothes. When she sat in front of the mirror, wiping away the fake coal dust, Ethan happened to walk through the door. In that exact instant, he froze completely, his mind going totally blank. Without the grime, Rose possessed flawless white skin and stunning features, looking like an absolute goddess. Ethan screamed in his mind with pure excitement. "Oh my god, I didn't marry a jinx. I just found the ultimate hidden treasure." Seeing her husband walk in, Rose lowered her head shyly and said with a slight sigh, "Honey, the money from the fish cleared our debt, but we are completely out of salt for cooking, and all we have left is this bitter, coarse rock salt." Ethan looked at the bowl of dirty yellow salt chunks, and a brilliant idea flashed through his modern mind. In an era where even coarse salt was treated like gold, possessing modern refining techniques was a literal cheat code to infinite wealth. He gave Rose a mysterious wink. "Baby, your husband is about to open your eyes today." Ethan rolled up his sleeves and walked over to the stove, expertly starting a fire and dumping the coarse salt into a pot with water. He used modern chemical refining steps to filter and evaporate the liquid, and as the water boiled away, thick white steam rose into the air. When the final product was revealed, Rose was completely shelled and shocked, for the coarse yellow rocks had transformed into pure white, flawless fine salt that looked exactly like fresh snow. "Wow, honey, you are incredible." Rose jumped up and down around the stove like a happy kid, but Ethan didn't stop there. Using his knowledge, he developed another highly profitable business, handmade artisan soap. He used his freshly made soap to give Rose a relaxing, fragrant bath, and looking at his wife's smooth, glowing skin, Ethan knew their ticket to wealth had officially arrived. To raise the money for mass production, he struck a deal with Uncle Dennis, trading his advanced fishing techniques for funding. With the capital secured, Ethan and Rose pushed their cart filled with the very first batch of premium soap into Kingston City. But on the busy streets of the city, the air was suddenly ruined by a sharp, arrogant voice as Tiffany Jang, the wealthy heiress who monopolized the city's soap trade, blocked their path with a squad of bodyguards. Tiffany looked incredibly proud and condescending, bragging that her family controlled the entire market and accusing Ethan of selling illegal bootleg products. They even insulted Rose, calling her a jinx in public, which completely crossed the line. Ethan's cousins, Danny and Ben, stepped up and handled the situation, beating Tiffany's thugs until they were crying on the pavement. The massive street brawl drew the local authorities, and everyone was hauled straight to the mayor's office. Inside the courthouse, the corrupt Mayor Vance openly sided with the rich family, offering Tiffany a comfortable chair while letting her frame Ethan. To prove their innocence, Rose offered to demonstrate the soap right there, and Ethan showed the court how the soap left the skin smooth and fragrant, without any of the harsh dryness of regular soap. Hearing how magical the product was, Mayor Vance's eyes gleamed with pure greed, and he claimed the invention was being confiscated for the state, demanding Ethan hand over the secret formula or rot in a cell. Faced with tyranny, Ethan showed absolute backbone, choosing the cell over giving up up his hard work. Seeing an opening, Tiffany stepped in, offering to buy the formula for cash, and Ethan let out a cold laugh, demanding a ridiculous price. "You want it, $5,000 cash." Though it hurt her wallet, Tiffany bit the bullet and paid, thinking she could secure a total monopoly. But Tiffany didn't get to celebrate for long. Back in his yard, Ethan had already upgraded his product, pulling out a small porcelain jar containing pure fragrance oils he had distilled from wild mountain flowers. When a pink-scented premium bar soap was revealed, his family was absolutely stunned. Ethan sent a challenge to Tiffany for the upcoming trade expo. If his new product outperformed her old formula in 3 days, she would have to hand over her prime storefronts. Late that night, Wayne, who was still plotting revenge, hired 3 thieves to sneak into the yard and steal the new formula. But one of the idiots tripped over a bucket, waking up Danny and Ben, who caught them red-handed. Under intense pressure, the thieves broke completely, confessing that Wayne was the mastermind behind the heist. The next morning, Ethan marched the thieves straight into the expo, exposing Wayne's conspiracy right in front of Tiffany. Inside the courtroom where greed met justice, the villains finally ran face-down first into a brick wall. Wayne pointed a shaking finger at Ethan, roaring in pure rage, "It was you. I should have known you were behind this." Furious, he waved his hand to his men. "Kill him. Somebody kill Ethan right now." But before his thugs could move, a heavily armed state marshal pulled his weapon and stepped right in front of Ethan, his eyes sharp as a hawk as he barked, "Nobody moves a single inch. I don't give a damn." Wayne screamed, completely losing his mind, yelling at the 2 thugs hovering by the door and promising $5,000 to the man who killed Ethan today. The 2 thugs braced themselves to fight, but Ethan let out a cold laugh, blurred forward, and executed a flawless sequence of close-stand quarters combat maneuvers. A sharp scream echoed through the hall, and before anyone could see what happened, the arrogant Wayne was slammed hard onto the floor by Ethan's heavy fist, groaning in pain. Sitting to the side, Tiffany watched the display, completely stunned, while Wayne lay bleeding on the floor, still spitting out curses. Ethan didn't even grant him a second glance, turning to the marshal and saying calmly, "Marshal, this man is obstructing justice and hiring contract killers. Take him away." The deputies wasted no time, slapping heavy iron cuffs on Wayne and dragging him out of the building. Tiffany stood up and officially declared Ethan the winner of the expo, but the corporate warfare was far from over. Right then, slow, mocking footsteps echoed from the entrance, and a young man named Wyatt walked in wearing an expensive suit. He was the wealthy heir to the most powerful family in the state. The moment Wyatt saw Rose, his eyes lit up with pure lust, and he swaggered over whispering, "Hey Rose, why stay with this broke loser? Come sit at my table instead." He then looked down at Ethan with pure condescension. "So you're the peasant she married?" A literal bottom-dan feeder. Faced with the public insult, Ethan turned to his wife completely unfazed. "Baby, who is this clown? He looks like a total idiot." Wyatt's face turned bright red with embarrassment and fury, unable to accept that a poor nobody could create such a premium product. After Tiffany also mocked him for being small-dan-minded, Wyatt completely lost his mind, his face twisting with rage. He let out a feral roar, slammed, "Drop the attitude or keep playing dumb. Trying to cheat in front of real power is just a one-way ticket to humiliation." Inside the crowded Chicago Gallery Hall, the tension was thick enough to cut. Ethan stood with his arms tightly crossed, staring coldly at Charlie just steps away. "I am asking you one last time." Ethan's voice dropped like a stone. "Are you honoring this bet or not?" Charlie's face turned bright red, completely exposed in front of everyone. He simply turned his head away, acting like a total sore loser. "I am not honoring anything today," Charlie sneered through his teeth. "What are you gonna do about it? You wouldn't dare touch me here, not on Meg's personal turf." Watching this shameless display of arrogance, Ethan actually burst out laughing. He tilted his head just a fraction, shouting out toward the open doors, "Big bull, little bull." The moment the words left his lips, 2 massive, heavy Zen-set men stepped inside. They moved like giant stone towers, radiating pure, unadulterated aggression. They slammed their heavy hands down, pinning Charlie's shoulders to the floor. Ethan took half a step forward, his gaze carrying absolute terrifying pressure. He looked down at the panicking boy, delivering a slow, icy command. "Get on your knees. Are you dropping down yourself, or should my boys snap your joints? Or maybe the great Charlie likes wearing silk dresses, because I can easily grab one and show you off to the neighborhood." Faced with absolute brute force and total social destruction, the arrogant punk completely lost his nerve. Feeling the crushing weight on his shoulders, his knees buckled instantly under pressure. He collapsed onto the hard floor, sweating bullets through his fancy clothes. "All right, I get it." He choked out, "I messed up, is that enough?" Seeing the once-dan untouchable rich boy groveling like a stray dog, Ethan flashed a highly satisfied smile. He casually brushed some dust off his sleeve, dismissing the threat with a wave. "Fine. Since you apologized nicely, I'll let it slide this time. Sitting nearby, the wealthy Meg spoke up, officially ending the public drama. But with Charlie out of the way, Ethan hadn't forgotten the real prize. He turned around, smiling at Meg. Now, Miss Meg, about those prime shops we won in the wager. Is it time to talk business? Meg proved to be a real boss, straight up honoring her family's word. She told him to show up tomorrow to officially sign over the deeds. Ethan tipped his hat in gratitude, handing over his newly invented product, a bar of high Zan-grade organic soap. Then, under everyone's envious stares, he walked out with his wife. Rose, meanwhile, back at the mansion, Charlie's father heard the embarrassing news. He slammed his coffee cup down, shattering it into a million pieces. He pointed right at Charlie's face, screaming that he ruined their reputation. The very next morning, Ethan brought Rose to the massive store. Rose looked around the bright space, her eyes lighting up with excitement. She grabbed Ethan's arm tightly, practically jumping up and down. Honey, this place is absolutely huge. Is all of this really ours now? But before they could enjoy it, an old manager ruined the mood. He wore a plain gray vest, counting numbers behind the counter. He took one look at their clothes, slammed his ledger shut with a loud bang, and walked over waving his hands. All right, out, move it along. Where did you bums come from? This is a high Zen-end establishment. We sell premium cosmetics here, only for the city's upper crust. You two clearly can't afford this, so stop blocking the view. The smile vanished from Ethan's face, his expression turning dangerous. You like judging people by their covers. Is that how you run things here? The manager let out a loud laugh, pointing arrogantly at the front sign. You got a big mouth, kid. You think you can talk to me like that? Do you know who owns this place? The legendary Meg family. Keep acting tough, and I'll have my boys break your legs. Ethan didn't even blink. He just looked at Rose like the guy was an idiot. Who is this clown, honey? Why are there fools on every corner? Watch your mouth, the manager snapped. But before he could say another word, an icy female voice cut through the air. Shut up right now. The manager spun around, turned pale. Miss Meg, you're here. Perfect timing. These two bums are causing a scene in your shop. Meg walked in with smooth, elegant steps, looking at him like he was already dead. She pointed directly at Ethan, delivering the bad news piece by piece. Who gave you the authority to disrespect any customer here? Effective immediately, this man right here is your brand's and new boss. What? The words hit the manager like lightning. His legs turned to jelly instantly, and he hit the deck hard right in front of Ethan. He never imagined this plain Zan-looking kid actually bought out the entire building. Thinking about what he just said, he started slapping his own face, crying and begging on his knees. Boss, please forgive me. I have a family to feed. Just pretend I'm nothing and let me go. Ethan didn't even waste a glance, nodding to Big Bull to drag him out. After handing over the paperwork, Meg offered some friendly advice. Running a business wasn't a walk in the park. She didn't want to see the old shop fail. Ethan just smiled with absolute confidence as she walked away. With the keys in his hands, Ethan gathered the neighborhood crew inside. He unrolled a large blueprints layout covered in names of rare botanical ingredients. Uncle Bull leaned in closer, scratching his chin in total confusion. Ethan, we gathered all these plants just like you asked us to, but what are we actually making here? Rose sat beside him, blinking her big eyes. Are we making a better version of the soap from last time, honey? Ethan offered a knowing smile, a futuristic spark in his eyes. He took a slow sip of his coffee, making a massive announcement to the room. Uncle Bull, Rose, this new product is going to make us way more money. We are making high Zen-end perfume. Uncle Bull blinked, never hearing the word. Ethan explained it with absolute confidence. You just spray a tiny bit on your clothes and you smell amazing all day long. The rich ladies will go crazy for it. Uncle Bull still looked incredibly worried. Ethan had gambled their entire savings just to buy up all these flowers. He swallowed hard, whispering his fears. Ethan, we spent every cent we had. What if this stuff doesn't sell? How are we going to survive? Looking at the stressed old man, Ethan patted his shoulder, gently. A cocky, sharp smile crossed his lips, showing absolute control over the game. Uncle, just relax and trust me. I never go into a fight unprepared. With a new shop and the tech ready, he was about to run a total monopoly. Watch Ethan change the whole market, bringing wealth to the entire neighborhood. Ethan held up a small glass vial, showing off his new secret formula. Rose sprayed a few drops on her skin, and the room filled with an amazing scent. The boys were completely stunned. Ethan had massive plans for this. The market was way too big for them to handle alone. He needed a real corporate backbone, so he set his sights on Meg. He went straight to her family headquarters, demanding a business meeting. He opened with a wild offer, asking for 90% of the profits. Meg practically rolled her eyes, thinking he was completely insane. But the moment she smelled the perfume, her business instinct screamed success. She agreed to the 90% split, but under one strict condition. She needed to speak with Ethan alone inside her private office. The scene shifts to a High Zan Society charity gala. Charlie showed up waving an expensive fan, looking as smug as ever. Meg made it clear he wasn't welcome, but the hosts kept the peace. The announcer stepped up to the microphone, stating the theme of the night's competition, stories of wartime grit and steel. Charlie grinned from ear to ear. His old man was the city sheriff, so this was a total walkover for him. He looked over at Ethan with pure contempt, setting up a massive High Zan stakes wager. If Ethan lost, he'd give up the formula and his wife Rose would go to Charlie. If Charlie lost, he'd owe Ethan a cool $100,000. Meanwhile, people in the crowd whispered. Turns out Meg had a bad reputation for being cursed in love. All her past fiancés had vanished. Her family was getting desperate, even offering cash bonuses just to get signed Xan-ups. But why was Ethan jumping into this mess? During their private meeting yesterday, Meg had confessed her true feelings. She didn't want a real marriage, she just wanted to run the business. She needed Ethan to win the event, acting as a shield against suitors. In exchange, she signed the perfume deal. Ethan agreed to the fake engagement, but the moment he left the office, Rose turned incredibly jealous. Meg was rich and beautiful, so Rose thought it might become real. Ethan immediately went into comfort mode, promising he would never actually marry Meg. Back at the gala, Charlie took the stage. He rambled for 5 straight minutes, delivering a terrible basic speech, but his crowd of Yes Jan men cheered anyway, hyping him up like crazy. Ethan couldn't stand the fake applause, calling them a bunch of phonies. He stepped up to the microphone, delivering a powerful cinematic speech about honor on the battlefield. His words left the judges speechless. They stood up to applaud his masterpiece. Without a doubt, Ethan won top prize, becoming the official choice for the family. Charlie lost his mind, pointing at Ethan. "The guy is already married," he yelled. Ethan pulled Rose close to his side, proudly introducing his beautiful wife. Charlie snapped, calling Meg a cursed freak. Ethan shut him down completely, sending the rich boy running with his tail between his legs. To make things wilder, Meg's dad saw that Ethan didn't drop dead from the curse. The old man figured Ethan was special, suggesting he take Meg as his main wife. Rose selflessly offered to step aside, but Ethan quickly made up an excuse about urgent business to take care of, skipping out before things got too complicated. With the trolls gone, Ethan and Meg sat down to finalize the business details. Meg was thrilled with his performance. Ethan struck while the iron was hot, revealing 2 distinct product lines. The luxury edition would cost $30, targeting the wealthy socialites. The standard line would be $5, moving high volume to regular folks. Meg was completely blown away by his brilliant market strategy. They shook hands on the deal, setting their grand plan into motion. Inside the back room, the mood was tense. Ethan looked completely calm, handing a fat check over to his boy Tiger. He whispered some strict instructions. Get a few guys to act like outzan of Zantown buyers. Go to Charlie's shops and place huge orders. Force them to buy up all the raw materials. Make them hoard as much stock as possible. Ethan then handed out some documents to the rest of his crew. Send these to every lab in town. Tiger took a look and gasped out loud. It was the secret formula to their perfume. The bald guy in the corner got it instantly, slapping his knee with a laugh. If everyone can make the exact same perfume, Charlie's overstocked goods won't sell at all. With all that money tied up in raw materials, their entire business will go belly up overnight. But the corporate warfare was just starting, and Ethan's next weapon was already done. Inside the steaming lab house, the bald guy brought in the final supplies. Looking at the strange glass tubes, he asked what they were for. Ethan smiled with total confidence. We are using a new distillation process. This is second Zan generation perfume. Over at Meg's luxurious estate, the new glass bottles covered the tables. Meg was happily testing the samples as her parents walked into the room. She proudly showed off the new line, explaining that Ethan gave them exclusive rights. Her father looked at the profit projections, smiling from ear to ear. He liked Ethan more and more each day, calling him a man of real vision. Too bad he's already taken, the dad teased. He would have made a perfect son, in-law. Meg blushed bright red, cutting him off before running out of the room embarrassedly. Meanwhile, their rivals were plotting. Back at his own storefront, Charlie smelled a red bottle of knockoff perfume, looking incredibly smug and arrogant. Right then, Ethan and Tiger walked in, moving with absolute authority. Ethan stared him down, asking what he was up to. Charlie snapped his fan shut with a cold laugh. "Your perfume doesn't have a city license," he sneered, getting right in Ethan's face. "Who do you think is backing you here?" Ethan stood his ground without flinching. "My business is completely legit, pal. I don't need your permission." Seeing Ethan's unyielding attitude, Charlie's face twisted with pure rage. "Smash the place," he screamed to his thugs. He even claimed Ethan's perfume was toxic, acting like he was doing community service. But Charlie had no idea he was walking into a trap. Back at the lab, Ethan poured the new batch, handing a crystal clear glass to his crew. The bald guy took a deep breath, and his eyes nearly popped out of his head. "This is 100 times stronger," he yelled. "There is no chemical smell at all." The rest of the boys were amazed, cheering for Ethan's brilliant mind. Ethan calmly explained the science. "The old stuff was just boiled down. This distilled version lasts way longer." Back at the shop, Charlie kept pushing. He offered Ethan a fake way out. "Hand over the new secret formula," he whispered with a greasy smile. "And maybe I won't wreck your little shop." Ethan just laughed, seeing right through him. Charlie thought he held all the cards, telling Ethan to relax and play ball. To crush the competition for good, Ethan executed phase 2 of his plan. He handed another large check to the bald guy, along with a massive procurement list. The guy looked at the numbers nervously. "Prices are skyrocketing out there. Ethan, if we buy this much stock at these rates, we might lose everything if it drops." Ethan just patted his shoulder reassuringly. "Don't worry about the short-term cost. We are playing the long game here." Seeing his boss so cool and collected, the bald guy pumped his fist in the air. "If this lands, they are completely ruined. Time to pay them back for everything." Meanwhile, Ethan opened a hide-and angle outside the city's trade bureau. The wealthy socialite Scarlett walked down the steps, dressed in a stunning white coat. Her assistant whispered that someone wanted a word. Scarlett looked completely bored. "Tell them I'm busy," she said. The assistant quickly added a detail. "The man says he can solve your perfume crisis." Scarlett stopped dead in her tracks. Nobody was supposed to know about her supply issues. With a mix of curiosity and caution, she told her assistant to bring him inside. But as Ethan walked into her office, Scarlett let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "Look who it is," she sneered, crossing her arms. "The neighborhood nobody, Ethan." Ethan didn't let the insult get to him. He just offered a polite bow. "Your time is money, Miss Scarlett," he said. "I'm here to offer a guaranteed win deal." Scarlett scoffed, looking down her nose. "What could a guy like you possibly offer me?" On another street corner, Uncle Bull rushed over to meet up with Ethan. Ethan immediately asked if the crew was ready. Uncle Bull nodded with total certainty. "I got our best guys lined up for tonight. We move under the cover of darkness." Even with everything set, the old man still looked a bit anxious about the scale. "Are you sure we can pull this off, kid? The pressure is insane right now." Ethan offered a reassuring smile. "Don't worry, Uncle. The trap is set." Meanwhile, inside the rival mansion, Charlie's dad sat on his leather couch laughing like a typical corrupt politician. He praised his son for the huge cash flow, making over 100 grand in a single day. He bragged that Charlie was way smarter than that annoying kid Ethan. Charlie took a slow sip of his drink. "This is just the appetizer, Dad. Once we control the entire supply chain, we'll be printing money legally." The old man cheered, completely drunk on power. "We're gonna be rich for generations." The scene cuts back to Ethan's meeting. Faced with Scarlett's condescending tone, Ethan dropped a total bombshell on her desk. "You might be a big Zan City heiress," Ethan stated, "but your family sent you to Chicago as a punishment. And if this perfume launch fails, you lose your seat on the board completely." The words hit her right where it hurt. Her eyes turned incredibly sharp and hostile. Ethan immediately followed up with his terms. "I can secure your position permanently and guarantee a massive revenue stream." Over at Meg's place, while reviewing details, a voice suddenly called out Ethan's name. Meg ran into the room, her silk dress flowing. She looked incredibly stressed out, warning Ethan that Charlie was going all out. "Do you actually have a plan for this?" she asked. Ethan looked at her with a gentle smile, pulling a gorgeous pink bottle from his pocket. "This is step 1 of the counterattack." Back at Charlie's headquarters, the victory celebration came to a sudden halt. Their head of procurement ran in, covered in sweat. Charlie yelled at him for causing a scene. The guy dropped to his knees, trembling. "We couldn't buy the raw materials." Charlie's face turned pitch black. He jumped up and slapped the guy across the face, screaming at the top of his lungs, "You useless idiot. What do I pay you for?" The guy held his bruised cheek, crying. The market prices went crazy out there. They are completely off the charts. Meanwhile, Meg examined the pink bottle, asking if it was a new type of scent. Ethan nodded proudly, telling her to try it. The purity is on a whole different level. Meg was amazed by the quality, but she still had major safety concerns. What if Charlie tries to steal this formula too? They are already running a smear campaign, telling the papers our stuff is toxic. Back in the private office with Scarlett, the wealthy socialite finally stopped laughing, though she kept her guard up like a true shark. "What do you want from me in exchange?" Ethan smiled, holding up a single finger. "I don't need your money or your men. I just need your official trade stamp on this paperwork. Act as my legal shield in the city, and you get 10% of the net profit. Plus, I guarantee you keep your board seat." Back at Charlie's office, the mood was dead. The trembling employee finally said the number. Raw material prices are up 30 times. Charlie and his dad stared at each other, their arrogant smiles completely gone. But Charlie's ego was way too big to back down, especially with 100 grand in the bank. He slammed his fist against the desk. "Ethan is behind this market manipulation. He wants to see us run out of cash." "I don't care how much it costs," Charlie roared. "Buy up every single flower on the market. We buy everything. We leave him with nothing." He had no idea he was jumping headfirst into a bottomless pit Ethan dug for him. When dealing with lawless punks and corrupt power, the only language they understand is a heavy fist. Back at the trade hearing tribunal, the silence in the room was deafening. Ethan stared coldly at Charlie on the other side. "I'm going to ask you one last time. Are you paying up or not?" The exposed rich boy chose to act like a total animal. He adjusted his collar with a nasty sneer. "I'm not paying a single dime to a nobody like you. You think you can take me on Meg's property?" Ethan just shook his head and laughed. He didn't waste another word on the punk. "Big bull, little bull," he barked. The two muscle-bound brothers stepped forward, radiating pure, violent energy. They grabbed Charlie, slamming him down. Ethan stepped into his personal space, his gaze cold enough to freeze water. "Get on your knees right now. Are you doing it yourself, or should my boys snap your shoulders out of place? Or maybe you want to wear a dress, because I can easily arrange that and parade you down the main street." Faced with actual terrifying violence, the tough Jan guy act vanished in a second. Feeling the bones and crushing grip on his shoulders, Charlie's legs gave out completely. He collapsed onto the floor in total humiliation, sweating through his expensive suit. All right, I surrender," he screamed. Seeing the arrogant punk begging like a dog, Ethan just brushed some dust off his shirt. "Since you apologized, I'll let it go." Meg sat above them, closing the case. With the legal drama sorted out, Ethan focused back on the real prize. "Now, Miss Meg, about those shop titles." Meg smiled, keeping her side of the bargain. "Show up tomorrow, and the deeds are yours." Ethan thanked her, leaving with Rose. Meanwhile, back at the family estate, Charlie's dad found out about the total disaster. He threw his coffee cup across the room, screaming at Charlie for ruining their name. The next day, Ethan brought Rose to check out their brand new flagship store. Rose's eyes were wide with pure joy, holding Ethan's arm as tight as she could. "Is this massive place really all ours?" But the good mood didn't last long. The old manager in the gray vest walked over, looking at their simple clothes with pure disgust. "Get these bums out of my lobby," he shouted. "This is a luxury boutique, not a soup kitchen." Ethan's face went completely stones in cold. "You judge customers by their wallets. Is that how you do business here?" The manager laughed right in his face. "You think you can talk back to me, kid? The Meg family owns this entire block. Keep talking and I'll have you thrown in an alley. Ethan just looked at Rose, shaking his head. Why is it always the stupid ones, honey? What did you call me? The manager yelled, but a freezing voice cut him off from behind. Shut your mouth right now. The manager turned around, seeing Meg walk in. Miss Meg, thank goodness you're here. These two bums are causing trouble. Meg walked up, her eyes full of fury. She pointed directly at Ethan, speaking clearly. Who gave you permission to insult our guests? Furthermore, as of today, this man is your brand new employer. What? The manager looked like he got hit by a truck. His knees buckled, and he hit the floor hard. He never thought this plain kid owned the joint. Terrified of losing his job and status, he started slapping his own face, crying, "Boss, please, have mercy on me." Ethan didn't even look, waving Bull to drag him out. Meg gave Ethan a quick warning about the risks, wishing him luck before heading out. Once the room was clear, Ethan called the crew in, unrolling the master plan on the table. Uncle Bull looked at the complicated charts. "We got all the chemicals and plants ready, kid. But what are we actually building here?" Rose looked on, curious about the process. "Is it a new kind of soap, honey?" Ethan smiled, a sharp look in his eyes. "We are making something way better. It is called Haijian and Perfume." "Perfume?" Uncle Bull scratched his head. Ethan explained the luxury marketing angle. "A few drops and you smell great all day. The rich elite will pay top dollar for it." Uncle Bull still looked stressed about the cash. "We spent every dime we had on this stock. If this fails, we are out on the street." Ethan placed a hand on his shoulder, smiling. "Trust me, Uncle, I don't lose." He was about to completely disrupt the market. Watch Ethan take over the whole city trade, turning his crew into absolute millionaires. But corporate warfare gets dirty real fast. To force a monopoly, the corrupt Charlie wrecked Scarlett's partner shops, running a half-Dan price dumping strategy next door. He even threatened Scarlet-Face Danta Zanface, telling her to submit or face total ruin. Ethan wasn't about to let that slide. He offered to take over Scarlet's supply lines, going all Zan in against the rich punk. Scarlet agreed without a second thought. This move pushed Charlie over the edge. His father thought Ethan would run out of cash, but Charlie wanted total revenge. He targeted the perfume business and targeted Ethan's wife, Rose. He hired a local mafia hitman named Silas, paying him a fortune to eliminate Ethan. He even got some illegal knock-out drugs, planning to kidnap the ladies that very night. But Charlie completely underestimated his target. Ethan saw the play coming from a mile away, setting up a perfect ambush with his boys. Silas barely stepped into the alley before he was pinned to the concrete. Ethan gave the hitman a simple choice: talk tomorrow in court or disappear tonight. Next, Ethan intercepted Charlie's driver, who was carrying a drugged Scarlet to a car. The driver cracked instantly under pressure, begging for his life and spilling the entire plan. Ethan took the unconscious Scarlet to safety. When she woke up and heard the truth, she was absolutely furious at the betrayal. Ethan told her he had all the evidence ready. Tomorrow morning, we dropped the hammer on them. Meanwhile, the clueless Charlie snuck into a room, thinking he was about to get away with the crime, totally blind to the trap waiting for him. The next morning, the courtroom was packed. Charlie was brought in chains, forced to kneel. The judge read off the charges of kidnapping and attempted murder. Charlie kept screaming his innocence. "I didn't touch anyone. I didn't do it." The judge just signaled the bailiff, bringing out the driver and the hitman Silas. They pointed fingers instantly, ruining his defense. Charlie snapped, cursing out his own men before screaming at Ethan in total desperation. "You're just a nobody. You don't belong here." The judge slammed his gavel down hard, revealing a direct order from the federal authorities. The family's political immunity was revoked. Charlie and his father were stripped of all titles, their assets seized, sent straight to maximum security to await federal execution. The arrogant rich boy screamed as he was dragged away. With the bad guys gone, the danger was over, but Ethan's personal life got complicated real fast. Scarlet walked up to him, acting completely strange. She claimed their fake relationship was public now, insisting he marry her to save her reputation, even saying she didn't mind being a second wife. Ethan backed away, totally freaked out. Right then, Rose kicked the the door open, looking furious. What exactly is going on here, Ethan? Scarlett kept fueling the fire, demanding answers. Poor Ethan had no way out. The billionaire Alex fell to the floor, his face completely covered in blood. As his consciousness began to fade, he murmured a final words. Honey, I'm coming to join you. But nobody could have ever predicted the wild joke fate was about to play. When Alex opened his eyes again, an old 1989互助 IO broadcast was playing. He stared at his uninjured hands, then looked at the calendar on the wall. It read May 31秒 T 1989. Alex was completely frozen in shock. This day was his worst nightmare. Back then, he lost everything to gambling. He used to beat his wife Rachel, and even tried to sell his daughter Lily. Right then, the door swung open. Rachel stood there covered in bruises, holding Lily with absolute terror in her eyes. Seeing Alex stand up from the floor, Rachel stumbled back in pure panic. She dropped straight to her knees, shoving a few borrowed dollars into his hand. Take it and go gamble, she wept. Just please don't sell our daughter. I'll sell my own blood if I have to. Looking at his broken, desperate wife, Alex felt a sharp blade pierce his heart. He slapped himself across the face hard, begging for her forgiveness through tears, vowing to change his life forever. To make up for his terrible sins, Alex cooked a massive, beautiful dinner. Lily clapped her small hands in joy, seeing real meat for the first time in months. Alex smiled, handing her a fork, then turned around to clean the room. But he didn't see the look on Rachel's face. There was no joy in her eyes, only a terrifying, cold silence. This is our last meal with this monster, Rachel thought to herself quietly. Once we finish, I'm taking Lily away. While Alex was cleaning up bottles, the neighbor Brad started banging on the door. He was screaming about the unpaid debts. As Alex moved to answer it, he noticed a bottle of toxic weed killer on the desk. Suddenly, memories of his past life flooded his mind like a raging river. He remembered Seth crying at the funeral, telling him Rachel poisoned the kids before jumping into the river to end it all. Looking at that deadly bottle of chemicals, Alex felt a chill run down his spine. He realized Rachel was planning a suicide. He was completely running out of time to make money fast and save his family. Alex immediately went into action. He tracked down his old buddy Thomas, asking to borrow his empty suburban warehouse. Thomas was confused by his sudden change, wondering why he wasn't playing cards, but he agreed out of old friendship. Next, Alex cornered the local farmer right at the edge of the neighborhood. The farmer was skeptical about the large potato order, but he trusted Thomas's word, promising to deliver a truckload soon. With the supply locked down, Alex grabbed Seth on the street corner, asking if he wanted to make real cash. Soon, Alex brought Seth straight to the Detroit Grain Bureau headquarters. The moment they walked through the lobby, they saw two officers playing ping-zan pong on duty. Alex's eyes turned stone-zan cold, his billionaire authority flaring up instantly. He snapped at them with total dominance, completely terrifying the two lazy workers. Alex pulled off a hide-zan society act, ordering them to get the chief downstairs immediately. Upstairs, Chief Zhao was relaxing, drinking tea and reading the morning paper. Alex didn't even bother to knock, walking right in with Seth behind him. He sat down, took off his sunglasses, and took complete control of the room. He told the chief a massive grain shipment was heading their way in a few days. The chief looked completely confused, but Alex dropped a heavy hint. My old man runs the city district now, Alex said with a dangerous smile. Smart men don't ask too many questions. Hearing about the powerful family connection and seeing Alex's luxury attitude, the chief thought he was dealing with royalty. He immediately started smiling and offering cigars. Seeing the chief take the bait, Alex kept dangling the hook. I pay full market value for the grain, Alex stated smoothly. Help me clear this deal quickly and I'll put in a good word with my dad. It is time you got that promotion. The chief was absolutely thrilled. While Alex was lighting up his smoke, the chief quietly walked to his desk, slipping a fat envelope stuffed with cash right into Seth's old canvas bag. Alex stood up, giving a final warning to prepare, then walked out like a true boss. The moment they hit the sidewalk, Seth grabbed his arm in total shock. "Do you actually have ties to the city?" Alex couldn't help but laugh out loud. "I made the whole thing up," he admitted. But with the chief's seed money, their business was officially off the ground. Alex told Seth to change the locks on Thomas's old suburban warehouse immediately. Later, Alex headed back home happily, carrying a brand new Barbie doll for Lily, but he ran right into Brad's wife in the hallway. Still bitter about their past arguments, she started mocking him instantly. "Can't even buy bread, but buying toys." She got angrier as she kept yelling, threatening to call her cousin the sheriff to have Alex locked up for good. The scene suddenly shifts 30 years later. Alex was now the multi-Zen millionaire chairman of the massive industry group. He sat alone in his high Zen end office, staring at the only old photo of his family. Right then, his beautiful secretary walked in, wearing a stunning tight red dress. She boldly sat right on his lap, snatching the old picture from his hands. She laughed at how cheap it looked, pouting her lips at the billionaire. "Is this old thing really better looking than me?" Alex's expression turned freezing cold. "Give it back," he ordered quietly, but the spoiled secretary didn't listen, demanding he spend the night with her first. Her cheap behavior completely crossed the line. With a violent wave of his arm, Alex shoved her straight off his lap. She hit the floor hard, the glass photo frame shattering right beside her. Alex stood up, looking down at her with pure killer intent in his eyes. "Nobody touches that photograph," he roared. "You're fired. Get the hell out." The secretary couldn't believe her ears. After working for him for so many years, she was ruined over an old picture. She shook with pure rage on the floor, staring venomously at his back. As Alex reached the exit, turning around to ask if she needed security to remove her, the woman completely lost her mind. She grabbed a heavy glass ashtray from the desk, lunged forward, and smashed it directly into the back of Alex's head. With a sickening crack, Alex collapsed, blood pouring out onto the rug. But the secretary was totally insane now. Covered in his blood, she jumped on top of him, swinging the heavy glass down again and again until the billionaire stopped moving entirely. Right then, her partner rushed into the room. He looked at the scene in absolute horror. "What did you do? You killed him." The woman just wiped the blood from her face, letting out a chilling, psychotic laugh. "Half the company is already under my name," she whispered with a twisted grin. "We fabricate a cause of death, and this entire empire belongs to us." Lying in a pool of his own blood, Alex's vitals dropped down to zero. At the very edge of death, his most painful memory flashed again. In that broken-down apartment room, the old Alex was raging like a beast. He was screaming at Rachel for her hidden cash, while Lily sobbed in the dark corner. Rachel was bleeding, holding his leg, begging him to stop the madness. But the gambling addict had lost his humanity. He kicked her away, grabbing the crying child. "We don't even have money for the tables. What good is keeping this brat around? Selling her is better than starving." Ignoring Rachel's agonizing screams, he stormed out into the night with the baby. The vision ended on Rachel's empty eyes, filled with total permanent despair. This was the sin no amount of money could fix. This was the tragedy he returned to change. "You were acting so tough before. Why aren't you saying a word today?" Alex never expected to get ambushed the moment he stepped out onto the street. One of Brad's thugs blocked his path, backed up by a mean Zan-looking crowd. Brad's sister stood right in the center, wearing a cheap flannel shirt with a sneer. She spat insults right at Alex's face, demanding he get down on his knees. "Where is that trash wife of yours?" she yelled. "Tell her to get out here and kneel too." Hearing them disrespect his wife, Alex's eyes went completely dead. He took a slow step forward. "What did you just say?" he whispered. The woman didn't realize the danger, sticking her neck out to yell again. "I said your wife is nothing but trash." Bang. A sharp slap echoed down the block. Alex delivered a massive backhand strike, spinning the loudmouth right off her feet. She crashed hard onto the concrete. She grabbed her swollen face, screaming for help. The thug went completely ballistic, pulling out a switch-yum blade knife. "I'm gonna carve you up," he roared. "Drop the knife. Don't you dare touch him." A powerful voice boomed from the crowd. Chief Zhao from the Grain Bureau stepped up, his face twisted in absolute anger. The young thug didn't know who he was, feeling tough because of his brother's connection. He flipped his knife around arrogantly. "Who the hell are you, old man? You don't know who you're messing with." The chief looked at him like he was an idiot. "Brad." The chief laughed coldly. "He is just a Lodzan Life Street broker. You don't even recognize me, and you're trying to act tough." The thug took a closer look at the chief's suit, realizing it was the powerful city official. Sweat started dripping from his palms, but the chief's next words destroyed him. "You think you're allowed to question Master Alex? He can buy and sell your entire family. Apologize to the young master right now." The word master broke the thug's brain. He never imagined this plain Zan-looking guy had backing that terrified the chief himself. He lost all his courage instantly. He started bowing and apologizing frantically, grabbing his screaming sister by the arm, and fled the scene as fast as he could. But before all this drama happened, Alex had been working hard with Seth. Seth stared at a broken Zandown storefront with a sign that read printing and layout. "Why are we here, Alex?" Seth asked. Alex just smiled, walking inside the shop. "What have you been up to lately, Seth?" Seth scratched his head, looking down. "Just farming a few acres back home. I'm not cut out for much else." Alex patted his old friend's shoulder. "Forget the fields," Alex said with a smile. "You're working for me from now on." Seth's face lit up with pure joy, promising he had plenty of muscle to give. They walked up to the layout machine. "Can you do image rendering and brochures?" Alex asked the manager behind the desk. The guy didn't even bother to look up, typing slowly on his old keyboard. "Yeah, but it is gonna cost you 1 cent per image, 5 cents for layout." Seth's eyes practically popped out of his head. 5 cents, he yelled at the guy. "The photo studio next door charges 3 cents. Seeing Seth about to start a fistfight, Alex quickly pulled him back, covering his mouth, and offered a polite apology to the worker. Right then, a truck driver named Sun recognized Alex from across the room. "Hey, you're the food factory boss, right? Do you have a shipping contractor yet?" Turns out Sun managed local freight logistics for all the convenience stores in the district. Alex was desperately looking for transportation, so this was a total stroke of luck. It was exactly what he needed. Alex grabbed a notepad from Seth's bag, wrote down his warehouse address quickly, and handed it to the driver for a meeting. With that sorted, they left the shop. But the moment they walked out the door, the manager found a brown paper file left behind. The front read "Top Secret Project." The manager sneered to himself, muttering that the kid was just a phony as he ripped the seal open out of curiosity. But as he read the financial documents, his entire body went completely numb. Asset valuation, industrial production, million Zan unit manufacturing facility, target investment, $300 million. 300 million. That was global money. The manager's hands shook uncontrollably. Then he saw the photographs inside. The young kid he just disrespected was standing right next to the Wall Street elite, smiling like a corporate king. "What did I just do?" He panicked. The manager turned white, breaking into a sweat. He grabbed the file, jumped on his bicycle, and pedaled out the door like a madman, screaming down the street at the top of his lungs. "Mr. Alex, please wait, Mr. Alex." Down the road, Alex was talking to Seth about checking out alternative packaging plants. Suddenly, they heard loud gears grinding behind them. The manager slid his bike to a halt, gasping. All his old arrogance was completely gone, replaced by a desperate fake smile. "Sir, you dropped your files," he panted, offering the folder with both hands. "I made a huge mistake earlier, sir. Can we talk about that printing contract again?" Alex looked at the groveling man, laughing inside. He crossed his arms, looking completely bored. "I don't think that is necessary," Alex said. "Your rates are way out of my budget." The manager was desperate for the giant contract, losing all his professional dignity. "We can lower the price, whatever you want." That was exactly what Alex was waiting for. He held up 2 fingers, his eyes sharp. 0.2%, and I pay monthly, 0.2%. With net Fusencher terms. That was an absolute robbery of a deal. Any other day, the manager would have cursed, but thinking about that 3 Zan 100 Zan million background, he didn't even dare to blink. "Deal, no problem at all, sir," he agreed, terrified Alex might change his mind. "Let's sign the paperwork right now." Alex watched him grovel, smiling to himself. He finally had the cheap guy right where he wanted. The business was moving perfectly, but home was a completely different story. Alex had set up a beautiful dinner, and Lily was happily eating her food, saying she never had such a great meal. Right then, Rachel walked through the door. Seeing the expensive food on the table, there was no happiness in her eyes, only deep suspicion and rising anger. "Where did you get the money for this?" Alex tried to explain the big business deal, but she didn't give him a chance. Her face went pale, tears filling her eyes. "You went back to the gambling dens," she cried. "How many times do I have to tell you? Wake up and stop ruining our lives." She slammed the door and ran out crying, leaving Alex alone at the table, completely helpless in the silence. To make matters worse, other problems were waiting. Earlier that day, Alex passed by a neighbor's door. A woman named Lynn saw him and smiled. She wore a bright red dress, looking fancy, leaning against the frame of her apartment. "Hey Alex," she purred, fixing her hair. "We need to talk about something. Since when do you know such powerful people? Come inside for a glass of whiskey." Alex knew exactly what kind of person she was, politely declining her invitation immediately. "My wife is coming home soon," he said. "I need to get back and make dinner." But Lynn wasn't about to let a rich target slip away. Ignoring his refusal, she grabbed his arm tightly, pulling him straight into her apartment. Once inside, she claimed her pipes were leaking. Alex had no choice but to fix the plumbing, tightening the valves under the sink quickly. "All right, it is fixed," he said, standing up. "I'm heading out now." Suddenly, Lynn grabbed both his hands, flashing a wicked smile, and shoved him hard, knocking him flat onto the mattress behind him. Before he could move, she climbed on top of him, locking her arms around his neck, putting her entire weight on his chest. She ran a finger down his chin, whispering, "It is hard living alone all these years, Alex. I never have anyone to fix things around here. A woman needs a man's touch," she purred. "Otherwise, she just loses her beauty." She buried her face against his neck, trying every trick she knew to seduce him. But Alex didn't show a single emotion. He just lay there completely still, looking at her with cold, dead eyes. He felt nothing but absolute disgust for this shallow woman who used to mock him. Back at the kitchen table, reality returned. Alex put down his fork, looking at Rachel. "I haven't been gambling," he promised. "I'm actually opening a factory tomorrow. We are manufacturing potato chips." Rachel just stared at him, losing her temper. "You don't even have a regular job," she yelled. "Where would you get the cash for a factory?" Alex sighed, knowing words wouldn't fix it yet. That night, he tucked his family into bed safely, turning off the lights with a heavy heart. At dawn, he got dressed to leave for the plant. Rachel asked where he was going so early, and he smiled, buttoning his coat gently. "It is opening day. I need to be on Zan's site." Seeing his dedication, her anger softened slightly, choosing to trust him one last time. At the factory gates, Alex wore his best suit, looking sharp and ready for business. Seth was sleeping in the driver's seat of the truck, having watched the property all night. Alex woke him up with a quick pat on the back. "Thanks for the hard work, brother," Alex said. "I'll make sure you're well taken care of." Right then, Son arrived with the transport fleet, and they got down to discussing logistics. "Our main target is the suburban supermarkets," Alex stated, laying out the map. Son looked a bit skeptical about the rural crowd. "Those stores don't move a lot of cash," he said. "They usually trade in basic agricultural goods." Alex smiled wide, exactly what he wanted. "Perfect. I want the raw commodities. You move the stock and you get 2 cents a bag." Hearing the profit margin for his trucking crew, Son grinned from ear to ear, shaking hands on it. Alex then pulled Seth aside, giving orders to buy 30,000 more units from the packaging plant. Inside the office, Seth was working on the ledger, writing down the numbers with extreme care. Alex looked over his shoulder, impressed by the work. "You have incredible handwriting, Seth," he noted. Seth smiled proudly, sharing his past. "I was the only high school graduate in my town, but my family ran out of money for college, and my dad thought school was a waste of time." Seth looked down, saying people thought he was stupid. Alex's expression turned incredibly serious, grabbing Seth's hand with absolute conviction. "You're not stupid, brother. You're just honest. That is a rare trait in this business." Seth was deeply moved, his eyes tearing up. Alex then handed him the master company ledger, putting the entire financial heart in his hands. "I'll guard this with my life, boss," Seth vowed, but the walk home brought more trouble. Brad was waiting by the stairs of the apartment building, looking for a fight with his arms crossed. Seeing Alex holding a bag of chips, he stepped forward. "Stay away from Lynn," Brad warned aggressively. Alex frowned, completely annoyed by the drama. "What are you talking about?" Brad went ballistic, yelling in his face. "Everyone saw you go into her place. Have you no shame?" Alex just shook his head, completely done with him. "She had a leak. I fixed her pipes. Now get out of my way before I make you move." Brad backed down from the sheer intensity in Alex's voice, watching him walk upstairs with pure hatred in his eyes. Inside the apartment, Rachel was cleaning the room. Alex walked in, offering her the fresh batch of chips, proudly telling her it was their first run. But Rachel didn't smile, setting the bag aside. "People are talking about you and Lynn," she said. Alex looked at her with complete honesty. "I fixed her sink, Rachel. That is all it was." He took her hands, looking directly into her eyes. "I will never lie to you again. I promise." Rachel saw the truth in his gaze, finally letting it go. Soon, the day of the company dinner arrived. Rachel wore a stunning high zand and blue dress, looking absolutely beautiful in the mirror. Alex walked in, completely struck by his wife. "You look like a Hollywood star, honey," he gasped. Rachel blushed, telling him to get dressed quickly. They arrived at the grand downtown hall, Rachel looking up at the massive architecture in awe. Alex held Lily in his arms, looking at the skyline. "In a few years, 60 story towers will be everywhere." Rachel laughed, thinking he was just daydreaming again. But the good mood ruined the moment they hit the lobby. Rachel's old coworkers were waiting by the doors, and one of them, a woman named Sarah, sneered. "Well, look who finally showed up." Alex introduced himself politely as Rachel's husband, but the women just looked away with total contempt. The moment the family walked past, the gossip started, calling Alex a useless street bum who lived off his wife. Inside the private dining room, the tension was high. Everyone was waiting for the big boss, director Nibiu. Sarah and the others kept taking cheap shots at Alex, mocking him for his simple manners with Lily, calling them low-zan class citizens who ruined the vibe. They should just take their food to go. Sarah laughed. Rachel sat there, crying silently under the insults. Right then, Director New walked into the room, looking incredibly smug and important. The crowd immediately swarmed him, pouring drinks. Alex stood up politely, offering a handshake, but the director completely ignored him, turning away. The disrespect was absolute. Sarah then started bragging about her husband Thomas, stating he just locked down a $300 million deal tied to a major Wall Street investment group. The table gasped at the astronomical number, hearing them lay out their cheap lies to look big. Alex didn't bother arguing with them. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a thick stack of crisp $100 bills and dropped them on the table. Rachel tried to stop him, terrified of a scene. Sarah just laughed hysterically at the display. "You think you're tough. Say that to Director Nifu." But before the director could speak, the door burst open, and Thomas ran into the room, dripping with sweat. The confident boss looked completely terrified. The moment his eyes landed on Alex sitting quietly, his face turned white as a sheet, his legs shaking. He ignored his wife completely, running to Alex's side, bowing as low as he possibly could. "Mr. Alex, I had no idea you were here," he panted. "Please forgive the intrusion, sir." The entire table went completely stoned and cold silent, their mouths wide open in absolute shock. The legendary executive they were all worshipping was nothing but a low-zan tier supplier to Alex's firm. Alex looked at the trembling man, laughing coldly. Thomas desperately offered to drive Alex home in his luxury car, but Alex just delivered a final killing line. "If you drive me, who's taking your wife Sarah home?" Thomas broke into a cold sweat, unable to speak. Alex stood up, picked up his daughter Lily, and took his stunned wife Rachel by the hand. Leaving the crowd to their utter ruin and regret, he walked out of the room like a king. Back at the boutique earlier, Alex was spending big money, dropping over $600 on clothes for his family. The employees were envying the massive commission. Get used to the luxury lifestyle, honey. Alex had smiled, but the spending brought out the rivals. Brad and his wife showed up to cause trouble, calling Alex a broke country bum, but Brad was already shaking with fear beside her, slapping his wife across the face for her big mouth. He bowed to Alex, knowing Alex was a major investor now, and forced her to apologize to the family. But the wealth drew the attention of a rival boss named Chris. Chris used cash to buy information in the back alleys, learning about Alex's humble background. He used the information to spread rumors, calling Alex a former street criminal who beat his wife. Armed with the dirt, Chris walked into the factory, offering an $80,000 buyout for 80%. Seth was stunned by the massive amount, but Alex knew the play. Chris was facing a liquidity crisis, trying to buy the firm with nothing but an empty corporate IOU note. Exposed, Chris left with a warning that the ride was over. The retaliation came fast, with drivers quitting the next day, bought out by Chris's higher rates. Match their offer and double it, Alex ordered calmly. Right then, some drunken thugs broke into the facility, pushing Seth around and demanding they vacate the lease. Alex stared them down with killer intensity. If anything happens to this plant, I'll spend 10 grand to make sure you guys never walk again. His sheer power sent them running out the door. Meanwhile, Chris was drinking with his mistress in a lounge, planning to use the lease loopholes to shut Alex down for good. That night, Chris blocked Alex on the road again, bragging about his millions, threatening to crush him. Watch your windows tonight, kid, Chris smiled wickedly. Alex just laughed it off. I've been waiting for you to try. Back home, while having a quiet dinner with his family, Rachel brought up the scary rumors of bankruptcy. Alex comforted her, but a brick suddenly crashed right through their living room window, glass flying everywhere. Alex looked at the shards, knowing exactly who sent it, as the corporate war officially turned personal. The cold wind howled down the dark city street. Frank and Ben were walking fast. Suddenly, a group of tough-looking guys blocked their path. Their leader, Gavin, was flipping a brick in his hand. He glared at Frank and barked. He claimed Frank broke his windows. Pay up right now or nobody leaves, Gavin threatened. It was a pathetic excuse, pure extortion. Gavin kept shouting, signaling his men with bats to move in. Frank just let out a cold laugh. He didn't care about these low-level punks. In a flash, Frank's eyes went cold. Before Gavin could even blink, Frank disarmed a guy. He slammed the blunt end of a wooden bat right into Gavin's gut. The tables turned instantly. Gavin threw his hands up, breaking into a cold sweat. Frank smiled calmly, but his voice carried absolute authority. He gave Gavin two simple choices. Pay for my time or I break your legs. Gavin swallowed hard, completely terrified. He trembled and confessed Mr. Chen had sent him. But Frank wasn't playing games. I don't care who sent you, Frank said. I make the rules now. Under Frank's crushing pressure, Gavin completely cracked. He dropped straight to his knees, begging for mercy. He quickly handed over all his cash. Frank didn't even look at him. He tossed the bat aside and walked away with Ben. Gavin was left frozen in the wind, totally humiliated. By daytime, the mood at the factory was much lighter. Ben ran into Frank's office, glowing with excitement. He said Frank's new discount strategy was working like magic. Truck drivers were lining up around the block to load goods. The factory literally couldn't keep up with the demand. Ben couldn't stop smiling from ear to ear, but Frank sat at his desk looking deeply worried. He closed the ledger and sighed deeply. This boom is only temporary. Ben, Mr. Chen is ruthless and plays dirty. He came to my house to start trouble just days ago. Now that he has lost this round, he won't sit back. It's only a matter of time before he strikes again. Right then, a worker wearing a cap rushed in. He completely interrupted their conversation. The worker looked incredibly nervous. Frank, there's a guy outside demanding to see you. He says his name is Mr. Chen. Frank and Ben exchanged a quick look. They both knew the storm had officially arrived. Flashback to a bright, scorching afternoon. Mr. Chen was leaning against his black luxury sedan. A flashy woman wearing a pearl necklace clung to his arm. Seeing Frank, Mr. Chen flashed a fake, smug smile. Hope you slept well last night, Frank, he sneered. Before Frank could reply, Mr. Chen hugged his mistress tighter. "Our little corporate war has just begun," he bragged. "Don't go bankrupt too fast or it won't be fun." Then Mr. Chen decided to play his first dirty card. He looked right at his mistress and gave an order. "Tell all our distributors something right now. We are cutting our prices below Frank's rates." It was a blatant attempt to bleed Frank dry in a price war. Faced with the blatant provocation, Frank didn't blink. His expression remained completely calm. He turned to Ben and spoke casually. "Ben, call our drivers. We drop our prices even lower." Hearing this, Mr. Chen's mistress lost her cool. She shrieked loudly, warning Frank, "You really don't want to mess with Mr. Chen. His company is huge. He can crush you like a bug." Mr. Chen chuckled smugly alongside her. He stared Frank down, daring him to fight to the end. But Mr. Chen's tactics went way beyond price cuts. On another pitch-black night, Frank was walking alone. Suddenly, Ben came running up, coughing violently. His shirt was completely torn, and he held his chest. Ben was panicking, completely out of breath. "Frank, we have a massive problem," he screamed. Right after Frank left the factory, the thugs arrived. A mob sent by Mr. Chen stormed the facility. They smashed every single machine to pieces. They even left a chilling warning before leaving. "If this place opens tomorrow, we burn it down. We will come every day until you go under." Listening to Ben's frantic cry, Frank's face turned pure evil. He knew Mr. Chen was using pure intimidation. He wanted to scare away all the workers and drivers. Ben worried nobody would dare show up for work tomorrow. Frank took a deep breath, his mind racing with strategy. He looked at Ben and gave a sharp command. "Call every single employee tonight. Tell them the factory opens tomorrow as scheduled. And tell them everyone's salary is officially doubled." Money talks, and Frank's bold move saved the day. The next morning, the sun was bright. But a crowd of uninvited guests blocked the factory gates. A punk named Lynx walked in, wearing his hat sideways. He brought a few henchmen, acting like he owned the place. Seeing Frank, Lynx mocked him instantly. "Did you think our warning last night was a joke?" Lynx shoved his hands in his pockets, acting tough. "Yeah, I led the crew that trashed your place. What are you gonna do about it?" Tough guy. Faced with the punks, Frank kept his hands behind his back. His eyes were as calm as a dead sea. He asked Lynx in a flat voice, "How exactly are you going to pay for the damage?" Lynx laughed out loud, thinking Frank was terrified. The punks cheered, thinking Frank was a total coward. Lynx raised his hand, ordering his boys to smash more stuff. But right at that second, a massive twist happened. Heavy footsteps echoed through the courtyard. A big man in a black trench coat walked in. He had a buzz cut and a nasty scar across his face. He was backed by dozens of serious-looking men. It was Scarface Mike, the most feared enforcer around. Lynx's cocky attitude vanished into thin air instantly. He forced a fake smile and ran up to kiss up to him. But Mike didn't even look at the punk. He threw a massive backhand slap right across Lynx's face. The force sent Lynx spinning 3 times before hitting the dirt. Lynx lay there completely dizzy and dazed. Mike pointed a finger right at his nose and roared, "You dare mess with my boss's business." With a wave of Mike's hand, his men charged. They pinned Lynx and his crew down, beating them senseless. Frank stood by the whole time, watching coldly. On said the punks were thoroughly broken. Frank raised his hand. He walked over to Lynx, who was bleeding and crying. Frank looked down at him with pure disdain. "Go back and tell Mr. Chen this garbage doesn't work on me. Tell him to try harder next time," Frank warned. Lynx didn't dare say a word. He scrambled away with his men. With the punks gone, Mike turned to Frank with deep respect. Frank patted Mike on the shoulder with a smirk. "That nightclub of yours is a low-end operation. Mike, come work for me from now on. When my new factory opens, you are head of security." Mike was thrilled and nodded his head rapidly. Ben stood nearby, completely shocked by the alliance, but he still brought up a major business concern. "Even with Mike, if we keep selling regular chips, Mr. Chen will just use his corporate power to choke us." Frank gave a mysterious smile, dropping a bombshell. "Who said we're selling regular chips, Ben? At the new facility, we are launching crispy instant noodles." Ben was completely confused by the concept. He had never heard of instant noodles eaten dry as a snack. Frank patiently explained it was a ready-to-eat finger food. It was designed specifically as an affordable snack for kids. Frank pulled a piece of parchment paper from his jacket. It was a detailed secret recipe for the seasoning. "Keep this safe," Frank told Ben strictly. Frank possessed knowledge from his past life experiences spices. He had built a massive snack empire in a previous life. He couldn't perfectly replicate 21st century tech today, but this recipe was still a total cheat code against Mr. Chen. Looking at the formula, Ben's eyes lit up with hope. So why did a legendary street boss like Scarface Mike swallow his pride and swear total loyalty to Frank? The camera flashes back to a few weeks ago. Frank walked alone into a trendy dance club in Manhattan. Two girls at the door checked out his sharp suit. They tried to flirt and pull him inside to spend money. Frank remained completely stoic. He stated clearly he was only there to see Mike. The girls laughed, saying Mike didn't see random people. Frank didn't waste time with small talk. He looked the head girl straight in the eye. Go inside and tell Mike I can save his mother's life. Frank remembered a vital piece of news from his past life. He knew Mike was an incredibly devoted son. Right around this time, Mike's mother was terminally ill. Mike was completely broke, short exactly $1,300. In the previous timeline, Mike turned to armed robbery out of desperation. He ended up getting shot and killed by police on the spot. Frank used this exact information to step in. He appeared at the absolute darkest moment of Mike's life. Sure enough, the club doors flew open violently. Mike rushed out, dripping with sweat and looking frantic. Frank looked at him and stated the exact medical condition. He even named the exact $1,300 Mike needed. Mike was stunned, looking at Frank like a savior. Frank spoke calmly, offering to pay the entire bill. He promised to get the best doctors to cure her. But on one condition, Frank said, "You work for me." Mike didn't hesitate for a single second. "Save my mom, and my life belongs to you," Mike swore. Frank patted his shoulder, warning him against reckless crimes. The money cleared instantly, and the surgery was a success. From that day on, Mike was fiercely loyal to Frank. He proudly declared to his crew, Frank was his one and only true boss forever. Back in the present day, reality set in. Ben was still anxious about launching the new snack. Workers were still terrified of Mr. Chen's revenge distribution. Trucks were barely running, causing a total standstill. As Frank and Ben discussed logistics in the yard, the annoying punk, Lynx, showed up again with a few guys. He was acting incredibly cocky and throwing insults. Frank scoffed, refusing to waste words on a loser. Instead, he gave Ben a quick look to start an act. Ben caught on instantly, pulling out a cheap camera. He complained loudly so Lynx could hear every word. "Frank, why did we waste $50 a day renting this trash?" Frank raised his voice intentionally, sounding profound. "You don't get it, Ben. This camera is our ultimate weapon. We combine it with those photos we edited last week. Once the media runs the story, Mr. Chen is completely finished." Every single word reached Mr. Chen, who was walking up. Mr. Chen and his mistress didn't look scared at all. Instead, they burst out laughing, mocking Frank like a clown. Mr. Chen walked right up to Frank holding his mistress. "Are you completely out of your mind, Frank? You think fake photos can threaten a man like me?" Mr. Chen pulled a thick stack of $100 bills out. He waved the cash right in Frank's face like charity. "I thought you were a player, Frank," he mocked. "If your factory goes bust, come guard my front gate. Do a good job and I'll throw in a bonus." Faced with the deep personal insult, Frank didn't snap. Instead, a strange, sinister smile crept onto his face. He played right along, speaking in a mocked tone. "Mr. Chen, this was my old factory. I have memories here. Taking a few souvenir photos shouldn't bother you, right?" Mr. Chen was completely blinded by his arrogance. He had no idea he was walking straight into a trap. He waved his hand grandly and hugged his mistress tight. He posed proudly in front of the lens. "Take all the pictures you want. Go crazy," he bragged. Frank's smile widened as he raised the camera. The shutter clicked rapidly, capturing dozens of shots. Frank laughed silently to himself. "You literally begged for this, Chen. By this afternoon, I'll show you what real media warfare looks like." By afternoon, the setting sun painted the empty streets orange. Ben was still complaining non-stop on their walk. "He completely destroyed our business, Frank. Why did you agree to meet him at his restaurant? This is a total trap," Ben cried. Frank remained completely cool and relaxed. "The real show is just getting started, Ben. If Chen wants to play, we play to win." They arrived at the luxury private dining room. Frank kicked the door open and walked right in. Inside, Mr. Chen was getting cozy with his mistress at the table. The woman rolled her eyes, instantly throwing shade. "Wow, Frank, you actually showed up for a free meal." Frank didn't even look at her. Sitting down calmly, his expression was totally unbothered. Mr. Chen lit a cigar, leaning back like a king. He looked down on Frank with supreme arrogance. "Your factory has no workers left, Frank. It's just scrap metal. You have absolutely nothing left to fight me with." Surrender now and hand over the entire market. Faced with the intense pressure, Frank sat rock solid. He swirled the wine glass in his hand, a cold smile on his lips. His voice was quiet but incredibly powerful. If I lose workers, I can always hire more, Chen. That's a minor inconvenience for me. Since you are so eager to play games today, fine. I promise you, I will make your life a living hell. Frank slammed his drink down, draining the glass completely. He stood up and walked out with Ben, leaving Chen stunned. Mr. Chen was left furious, slamming his fist on the table. The moment they left the restaurant, Ben asked anxiously, "Frank, what is our immediate move now?" Frank stopped walking, a sharp gleam in his eyes. He turned to Ben with a serious expression. "Did you memorize the crispy noodle recipe I gave you?" Ben nodded quickly, realizing the gravity of the situation. Frank spoke fast, delivering the fatal blow strategy. "Go contact the raw material suppliers immediately. Focus entirely on the big flour mills. Our entire survival depends on this launch. This snack is going to bury Mr. Chen permanently." After sending Ben off, Frank kept walking down the street. Suddenly, a woman in a dark green coat blocked his path. She put her hands on her hips, looking furious. She demanded to know why they were lurking near her house. "Are you punks planning a robbery?" she yelled. Frank was confused, but kept his manners polite. "Ma'am, we're just here looking for Mr. Chen on business." Hearing that name, the woman's face twisted with rage. She crossed her arms and let out a bitter laugh. "Looking for that scumbag. Go check his factory. I hasn't seen that bastard in over 2 weeks." Frank blinked, analyzing her plain clothing. "Excuse me, but who exactly are you?" Frank asked carefully. The woman raised her chin, shouting proudly, "I am his wife." Frank and Ben stood frozen, their jaws literally dropping. Frank's mind spun instantly, seeing a golden opportunity. He pretended to look completely shocked and skeptical. He looked her up and down, shaking his head. "No way, you are joking, right?" Frank said. "We met Mr. Chen's wife just a few days ago. She was a young girl in a gold dress with a pearl necklace. There's no way his wife is someone like you." Frank's manipulation was absolute perfection. The words "young girl" and "gold dress" triggered an explosion. The volcano inside the wife erupted violently. She began shaking with pure, unadulterated rage. She grabbed Frank by his collar, her eyes bulging. "Tell me everything right now," she screamed hysterically. "Who is the bitch that scumbag is sleeping with?" Seeing the trap was set, Frank pretended to be terrified. He struggled to break free, stuttering intentionally. I must have remembered wrong, ma'am. I gotta go." The more Frank tried to leave, the more she believed it. She shoved Frank back and ripped open her purse. She slammed a massive stack of $100 bills into Ben's hands. She stared at Frank, her voice dripping with venom. "Take the cash, give me the truth, and I'll leave you out of it." Frank looked at the easy money, hiding his massive joy. He let out a fake sigh and leaned into her ear. "Look, I might be wrong, but a few days ago, I saw Chen holding hands with a young girl in a gold dress. They went shopping and then got into his black sedan, the car parked by the curb, and it was shaking violently. It kept bouncing up and down for a really long time. I don't know what they were doing in there, but that vivid description completely shattered her remaining sanity. Her mind filled with horrific images, her lips turning pale. She clenched her fists, her eyes shooting pure fire. "Chen, you cheating piece of garbage," she roared. "I am going to skin you alive." She didn't even pick up her dropped bag. She stormed off in her high heels straight to Chen's place. Watching her furious departure, Frank and Ben burst out laughing. Ben looked at Frank with pure worship and awe. Frank, sabotaging his personal life like that is evil. Frank smirked, tapping the camera in his pocket. "The drama is just reaching its climax, Ben. Let's go rent a better camera. Chen is about to suffer." On another stormy night, inside the food factory archive room, Frank and Ben were searching through a row of dense shelves. Suddenly, a cold, mocking laugh echoed behind them. Mr. Chen stood at the door, blocking the exit with his thug. Kane Chen stared at Frank with pure hatred in his eyes. "You pathetic losers thought you could steal my core recipe?" Before Frank could explain, Chen waved his hand coldly. "Kane, break his arms," Chen ordered savagely. Why had Mr. Chen become so completely unhinged? Flashback to his private office earlier that day. Chen had been pacing around throwing a massive tantrum. "That fraud Frank thinks he can play with me," he screamed. He slammed the desk, giving Kane an absolute death order. "The minute Frank's factory gets any good press, I want you to break his bones on the spot." Kane grinned, cracking his knuckles to prepare for violence. "He is all talk, boss. I'll make him beg for mercy today." Chen took a deep drag from his cigar, looking murderous. "Go, make sure he never walks again." But the biggest twists always happen at the peak of arrogance. The scene shifts to a quiet, dim alleyway. Ben's right arm was heavily wrapped in thick white gauze. He looked like he had barely survived a brutal war. But when he reached Frank, his face exploded with joy. He pulled a sealed envelope from his jacket with his good hand. "Frank, we got it. It worked perfectly," Ben gasped. While Kane's boys were cornering us, our inside guy moved. He slipped into the archive room and grabbed the real recipe. My broken arm was totally worth it. Looking at the core formula, Chen's worries vanished. He let out a loud, triumphant laugh in his office. He threw a massive stack of clean cash onto the table. "I've never been cheap with my loyal soldiers," Chen bragged. "Here is 25 grand. The extra 5 is your medical bonus." Kane and Ben stared at the money, smiling from ear to ear. Chen stared at the recipe, already imagining Frank's demise. With the tech in hand, Chen's confidence skyrocketed. The scene cuts to a high-end private penthouse. Lily was crying hysterically, looking at scratches on her face. She threw herself into Mr. Chen's arms, throwing a tantrum. "Frank is a monster. He exposed our affair to my husband. I was completely humiliated in public," she sobbed. But Mr. Chen just sipped his tea, looking totally unbothered. "Who cares? I wanted a divorce from that old lady anyway." Lily instantly stopped crying, wrapping herself around his neck. "Does that mean I finally become the official first lady of the factory?" Before they could celebrate, the door was slammed open. Kane rushed in, completely out of breath, clutching a newspaper. "Boss, big trouble, Frank. He is on the front page." The smiles on Chen and Lily's faces instantly froze. Chen snatched the paper, his brows furrowing deep. He was shocked. Frank knew how to leverage mainstream media, but he refused to show any fear or weakness. "He has no capital," Chen snapped, tossing the paper aside. "A little press can't compete with my massive operation." But Lily read the fine print and gasped in horror. "Sunday Food Factory, crispy instant noodles. What is this?" Seeing the massive ad campaign, Chen started losing his cool. He dropped his arrogant look and ordered Kane immediately, "Go buy a few packs of whatever Frank is making right now." Kane looked awkward and reached into his gray coat. He pulled out several colorful packs of crispy noodles. "Boss, every kid in the city is already fighting over these." Chen opened a pack skeptically and popped a piece in his mouth. As he chewed, his eyes widened in absolute shock. His face turned completely pale, looking utterly crushed. He had to admit Frank was a marketing genius. Making raw noodles taste this crunchy and seasoned was brilliant. But Lily was still short-sighted and elitist. "What are you scared of? Honey, it is just a kid's snack. Those broke students have no real purchasing power. They can never compete with our corporate scale." Hearing her words, Chen's panic eased up a bit, but Chen was still an experienced corporate shark. He knew the taste relied on a secret seasoning formula. To eliminate Frank permanently, a dark gaze filled his eyes. He turned to Kane and whispered a chilling order. "Go find that local kid. Leo, tell him I have a job for him." A dangerous conspiracy to steal the recipe began in the dark, but Chen had no idea he was playing a game he already lost. Frank was the one pulling all the strings from the start back in the spacious CEO office. Frank was casually sipping tea. Ben sat across from him, laughing and feeling totally relaxed. "Frank, you are brilliant. Putting a fake file there saved us. If they stole the real recipe, we'd be finished." Looking at the documents, Frank let out a cold, confident laugh. He looked up at Ben and dropped the ultimate twist. "Actually, I wanted them to steal that recipe." "What?" Ben gasped, literally sliding out of his chair. Frank closed the folder smoothly, explaining his master plan. "I knew Chen would try to steal our technology, so I had our guy plant a modified, corrupted formula. The steps are reversed, and the key seasoning is missing. The moment Chen starts mass production, he destroys his own brand." Ben broke into a cold sweat, looking at Frank with terror. Frank adjusted his suit, gave a reassuring smile, and walked out late at night. Frank was humming a song on his way home. Suddenly, loud bicycle chains rattled behind him. Ben came pedaling furiously on an old bike, drenched in sweat. Frank laughed, asking why he was riding bikes at midnight. Ben grabbed Frank's arm, his eyes wide with panic. Frank, massive news. Chen's factory just moved. Ben swallowed hard, his voice trembling with fear. I just passed the school bodega. It's everywhere. Chen launched his own brand overnight, copying us completely, and his wholesale price is a fraction cheaper than ours. Faced with the aggressive price war, Frank didn't get mad. Instead, he let out a loud, echoing laugh under the night sky. He adjusted his tie, his eyes cold and full of absolute confidence. The old man moves faster than I thought, Frank murmured. He thinks a fake recipe and some cash can steal my market. Fine, notify all our distributors immediately. We are dropping our profit margins to zero, selling at cost. I will burn cash to bleed him dry on this track. The final battle of this corporate war had officially begun. Early next morning, Frank was putting on his coat at home. His wife, Sarah, looked out from the kitchen. She asked him to stay for breakfast, but Frank waved her off. I'll grab a bite at the factory, honey, he said. Sarah hesitated, then brought up a request. Some girls at my old job are getting laid off tonight. Can we buy them dinner and see if you can find them work? Looking at his wife's kind heart, Frank smiled warmly. Of course, whatever you want, Sarah, he agreed. That evening, the family sat in a nice restaurant booth, but after waiting an hour, only Sue showed up. Sue looked embarrassed looking at the large feast. The other girls, Jenny and Karen, got held up, she explained. Frank didn't mind inviting Sue to start eating. Suddenly, the restaurant door was kicked open. Rudely, Jenny and Karen walked in, wearing heavy makeup and heels. They didn't look sorry at all. Their faces were pure arrogance. Jenny didn't even sit down, speaking in a loud, cold tone. We're not taking jobs at your little factory, Frank. Sue looked worried, asking if something went wrong. Jenny rolled her eyes, bragging to the entire room. My husband is childhood friends with Mr. Chen. Mr. Chen just hired both of us at his massive plant. The pay is huge, way more than your little startup can offer. Jenny gave Frank a disgusted look, mocking him openly. You are just a broke fraud trying to fight a billionaire. Sarah turned pale with fury, slamming her hand on the table. She grabbed Frank and their daughter, storming out instantly. With Frank's family gone, Jenny's toxic attitude got worse. She mocked Sue for staying with a sinking ship. Frank's factory is going bankrupt next week, mark my words. He is just a poser. When he loses everything, don't come crying to us. But Jenny had no idea what was happening behind closed doors. At that exact moment, Mr. Chen was at a high-end VIP lounge. He was drinking with the city's top bankers and officials. A corporate rep from a multinational food giant sat across from him. Chen was eagerly asking about the nationwide merger deal. The rep leaned back, laying out the terms coldly. Share your secret crispy noodle recipe with our global network. We handle distribution, and you get 15% net profit. The bankers cheered, telling Chen he was about to be a billionaire. Chen was ecstatic, downing his drink in one shot. He adjusted his glasses, feeling like the king of the world. He truly believed his stolen tech would make him a tycoon. But the corporate storm arrived without warning. A few days later, Frank was reading calmly in his empty office. Suddenly, Mike and Ben burst in, dripping with sweat. Mike slammed a newspaper onto the desk, panicking. Frank, look at the headlines. Chen signed the global deal. The boys were terrified their market share would vanish. But Frank didn't even look up from his book. Relax, boys. Don't panic, Frank said smoothly. Mike stamped his foot in regret. It is my fault, Frank. I failed to guard the archive room and lost the recipe. But right then, Frank dropped another massive bombshell. He closed the book, smiling at Mike gently. It's not your fault, Mike. I let them steal it. Mike and Ben stood frozen, completely speechless. Everything was going exactly according to Frank's script. To make the act look real, Frank gave Mike a weird order. I am going to publicly fire you tomorrow, Mike. But don't worry, you get triple pay during your vacation. With the counterattack set, Frank moved to step 2. Ben, buy out the ad space in every major newspaper. Run massive campaigns focusing on safety, organic, and health. After arranging the business, Frank had some personal joy. He moved Sarah and their daughter into a beautiful new mansion. Looking at the massive estate, Sarah felt overwhelmed. It's beautiful, Frank, but isn't this too expensive? Frank hugged her tightly, kissing her forehead. Nothing is too expensive for my beautiful wife and daughter. As they got romantic, their daughter looked up innocently. I am not sleeping with Daddy anymore, she chirped. Daddy always wrestles Mommy and squishes her on the bed. The innocent comment made Frank and Sarah instantly blush. The atmosphere became incredibly awkward and funny. Meanwhile, over at Mr. Chen's penthouse, things were wild. Jenny was sitting on Mr. Chen's lap, feeding him grapes. She was still cursing Frank out for being arrogant. Chen laughed coldly, looking down on Frank completely. He is a dead man walking. His factory closes in 5 days, but the universe delivers karma fast. Suddenly, a factory worker kicked the door open, crying, "Boss, disaster. All our distributors are canceling today." Chen jumped up, his eyes bulging with rage. "What the hell are you talking about?" he roared. The worker wiped his sweat, shaking violently. "News is everywhere. People say our noodles cause cancer. They say our food is made in toxic, illegal conditions. The newspapers even printed graphic photos of our facility." Chen and Jenny snatched the paper, reading the horrifying press. Chen shook with rage, screaming that it was a total lie. But Jenny looked closer at the photos and screamed in terror. "Chen, look at the background of these pictures. The trash, the flies. This isn't our main plant. This is that old abandoned warehouse we forced Frank to leave." In that exact second, the ugly truth hit them. They felt a freezing chill run straight down their spines. They finally realized they walked right into Frank's trap. Frank abandoned that toxic location on purpose. He took those photos weeks ago just for this media hit. The pictures were real, but the context was totally manipulated. Meanwhile, in his bright modern corporate office, Frank was writing lines on a small yellow notepad, smiling. Ben looked over his shoulder, completely confused. Frank handed the note to Ben, giving a dark command. "Have Mike's boys print 10,000 copies of this tonight. Plaster them on every wall and street corner in the city." Ben read the note and gasped. "Chen's food poisons local child. Company pays massive hush money to cover up death." The flyer even listed a fake victim's ID and address. Ben swallowed hard. "Frank, is this even true?" Frank winked, flashing a wicked smile. "Completely fake." Ben worried the scam would get exposed by the cops. Frank leaned back, taking a deep drag of his cigarette. His eyes showed the depth of a true mastermind. "The public doesn't double-check street flyers, Ben. Even if it's fake, the scandal will destroy his remaining reputation. To win a media war, you turn public opinion into a weapon." Then, Frank pulled out his ultimate trump card. Put a collectible historic hero card inside every single bag. Ben didn't get it at first, thinking it was a waste of money. Frank laughed out loud at his assistant's confusion. "Listen to the marketing loop, Ben. If a kid collects the whole set, they win a free crate of food. They buy, collect, win, and repeat the cycle forever." Ben was completely blown away, staring at Frank like a god. "Frank, you are a literal genius. How do you think of this?" Frank just smiled, thinking about 21st century marketing. In this era, modern promo strategies were a total cheat code. It was going to completely ruin Mr. Chen's finances. Sure enough, the combo move worked perfectly. The Sunday food factory gates were swamped with cargo trucks. Workers were sweating, moving thousands of orders a day. Frank stood in the yard, managing the chaos smoothly. With Chen's reputation dead, all his old clients crawled back. Distributors lined up for blocks, begging Frank for a second chance. Suddenly, a black sedan slammed its brakes at the gate. The door flew open, and a furious Mr. Chen stormed out. He pointed a finger at Frank, screaming like a crazy person. "You ruined my life with those fake photos." "Frank," he yelled, faced with his broken, raging enemy. Frank remained serene. He even politely offered Chen a cup of tea in his office. Suddenly, Frank's face turned icy cold, his eyes piercing. He stepped forward, completely revealing his cards. "I did it all, Chen. Every single bit of it. And that recipe you stole, it was a complete fake." Hearing this, Mr. Chen stood frozen, looking like a ghost. He tried to bluff, claiming his product was still selling. Frank let out a chilling laugh, refusing to argue. Instead, he reached down and grabbed a heavy red brick. He flipped the brick in his hand, his eyes completely dead. He stepped closer and closer to Mr. Chen, whispering, "Think about where you are right now, Chen. This is my turf. You walked in here alone to insult me. If I don't break your jaw right now, I am wasting a good brick." Looking at the heavy brick and Frank's killer expression, Mr. Chen's rich guy pride vanished instantly. His legs began shaking like leaves in the wind. He screamed in terror, scrambling back into his luxury car. He locked the doors, rolled down the window, and yelled, "You watch your back, Frank," he screamed, hitting the gas. The sedan sped away, leaving a cloud of black exhaust. Frank tossed the brick aside, dusting off his hands with a smirk. "Warm-up is over. Boys," Frank told his crew. "Now, let's deliver the actual lethal blow." Early next morning, workers gathered outside Frank's gate. The doors were locked, causing a massive panic among the staff. Rumors were flying that Frank had run away with the cash. Suddenly, a black luxury sedan pulled into the courtyard. Mr. Chen and Jenny stepped out looking smug. Chen took off his sunglasses, laughing at the closed gates. He assumed Frank's health scandal finally shut him down. Before he could celebrate, a mob of reporters rushed in. A female journalist shoved a microphone right in Chen's face. "Mr. Chen, is it true a child died from eating your food?" Another reporter pushed forward, yelling over the noise. "Did you pay a massive illegal bribe to silence the family? Did your thugs beat up the victim's parents?" The media ambush caught Chen completely off guard. His face turned completely red as he screamed it was a hoax. "We don't even have an employee by that name," he shrieked. He barely escaped the media mob running into his office. Chen paced around his room, cursing Frank's dirty street flyers. Jenny stood nearby, frantically trying to plan a legal defense. Meanwhile, the mood in Frank's office was very different. Frank was writing a document when a beautiful secretary walked in. She was sent by the powerful City Commerce Association president. She politely asked Frank to join a private dinner tonight. "The president wants to mediate the war between you and Chen." Frank paused, realizing Chen was getting desperate. "This dinner is a total setup, a trap," Frank murmured. He decided to bring Ben and his top enforcer, Mike, along. That night, the luxury private dining room was filled with food. The president sat at the head of the table, praising Frank. "You are a rising star, Frank. Your moves are legendary." Frank remained humble but firm. "Just basic business, sir." The president laughed, then got straight to the point. "I want you and Mr. Chen to shake hands and end this war." Faced with the pressure, Mr. Chen forced a fake smile. "We're all businessmen, Frank. No need to destroy each other." To show peace, Chen offered a massive bribe. "I will sign over a prime luxury penthouse in Manhattan to you." Frank looked at Chen's painful smile, seeing right through him. Chen wasn't being nice. His global partners were pulling out. The corporate giant was forcing Chen to settle the scandal. Mike sat next to Frank and couldn't control his anger. He slammed the table, standing up and pointing at Chen. "Where was this nice attitude when you tried to break our arms? Now that you are going under, you offer a cheap apartment. Are you smoking crack, Chen?" Mike roared. Chen's face turned purple with embarrassment. The president just sat there silently smoking his cigar. Frank took a slow sip of his tea, standing up calmly. "You tried to destroy my family, Chen. Now you want peace. You think we are idiots. This dinner is over." Frank waved his hand, walking out with Ben and Mike. After weeks of absolute corporate warfare, peace finally returned. Inside Frank's office, Ben was looking at the financial statements. He was laughing so hard he could barely breathe. "Frank, our daily revenue just cleared $10,000. In this era, we are making fortunes every single day." Suddenly, the heavy office door was violently kicked open. Gavin and a group of armed thugs stormed the room. They were holding iron pipes, looking completely wild. "Our boss wants to see you right now." "Old man," Gavin barked. The room went freezing cold. Mike braced himself to fight. But Frank used his eyes to signal Mike to hold back. Gavin laughed coldly, threatening to kill Mike if he moved. Faced with heavy weapons, Frank remained totally emotionless. He stood up calmly and let them take him away into the dark. The scene shifts to Mr. Chen's penthouse office. Chen sat on his leather sofa looking like a demon. Jenny was whispering to him, but Chen shoved her away angrily. Gavin pushed the door open, throwing Frank into the room. Seeing Frank, Mr. Chen's face twisted with pure insanity. He stood up, slamming a legal document onto the table. "Look at the screen, Frank," Chen screamed hysterically. The monitor showed Frank's pregnant wife and daughter tied up. They were gagged, crying in a dark warehouse. Chen roared like a lunatic, completely cornered. "If I don't get your real recipe and $20 million, I am going to federal prison for 20 years. I am 40 years old. I am not dying in a cell. Sign the factory transfer papers right now, or everyone dies." Looking at his suffering family, Frank's eyes filled with blood. Pure rage burned in his chest, wanting to rip Chen apart. But his family's lives were on the line. He had no leverage. Under Chen's insane pressure, Frank closed his eyes in pain. He took a deep breath and grabbed the pen from Gavin. As his wife wept on screen, Frank signed his factory away. Seeing the signature, Mr. Chen exploded with manic laughter. He snatched the contract, kissing the paper over and over. He walked up to Frank, slapping his cheek repeatedly. "You are just my bitch, Frank. You built this empire for me." Frank took the slaps, his face turned sideways, but his eyes flashed with a terrifying lethal promise of revenge. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the room. The heavy oak doors were blown off their hinges. Scarface Mike and 50 heavily armed men stormed the penthouse. Before Chen or Gavin could react, Mike lunged forward. His massive fist smashed right into Mr. Chen's face, breaking his nose. The office turned into a bloody war zone instantly. Gavin and his thugs tried to fight, but they were outnumbered. They were beaten to the ground within seconds, bones snapping. Mike grabbed Chen, throwing him through the glass dining table. Food, liquor, and blood covered Chen like a wet dog. Frank didn't waste a second, running to the monitor controls. He coordinated with Mike's field team to rescue his family. Within minutes, Sarah and his daughter were safe in his arms. Frank held his crying wife tightly, comforting her gently. Mr. Chen lay in the glass shards, spitting blood and screaming, "I'll kill you, Frank. You set me up," he shrieked. Frank turned around, looking down at Chen like a piece of trash. Outside, federal sirens wailed, filling the night with red lights. FBI agents stormed the room, dragging Chen away in chains. Mr. Chen's life was officially over. After surviving the ultimate crisis, Frank won the entire market. His corporate empire expanded across the entire country. Winter passed and New Year's Eve finally arrived. Massive fireworks exploded across the Manhattan skyline. Frank stood by the window of his warm, beautiful penthouse. He gently wrapped his arms around his pregnant wife from behind. They looked at the beautiful city lights, smiling happily. "Happy New Year, Sarah," Frank whispered in her ear. Sarah turned around, tears of joy in her eyes. "Happy New Year, Frank," she replied, leaning onto his chest. After surviving the conspiracies, the corporate wars, and death, Frank successfully protected his business and his family. "Let's go make dinner together," Frank smiled, kissing her. The main story ended in absolute warmth and peace, but the epilogue delivered the final closure. After the holidays, Ben walked into Frank's massive office. He looked healthy, happy, and incredibly excited. "Frank, the federal court just handed down the final verdict. For kidnapping, extortion, and corporate fraud, Chen just got sentenced to 25 years in maximum security." Frank leaned back in his leather chair, locking his hands behind his head. He didn't cheer. He just let out a philosophical sigh. 25 years, that's a whole lifetime, Ben. Let the old man spend his remaining days sewing uniforms in a cell. It was the absolute perfect justice for a criminal. Ben smiled, then asked the ultimate business question. "Frank, how did you predict every single move he made?" Frank smiled mysteriously, revealing his final financial trick. "I didn't just ruin his reputation, Ben. I used the global giant's pressure to force his stock down. Then, using our political connections, I bought his shares. We secretly acquired 80% of Chen's entire company at pennies. Tomorrow, we officially merge both operations. We are launching the Longwu conglomerate nationwide." Frank had completely swallowed his enemy whole. He stood alone at the top, the ultimate king of the corporate jungle.